Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Isabella Rodriguez. Isabella Rodriguez was born in Colombia in 1975 and moved to Florida with her family in the 1990s. They obtained U.S. residency and eventually citizenship in 2002, when Isabella was 27. She married William Hellman, but they divorced in 2015 after a decade together. Isabella then met Lewis Bennett online, and they began a romantic relationship. In 2016, Isabella and Lewis had a daughter named Emilia. 6 months later, they purchased an apartment in Delray Beach, a city on Florida's Atlantic coast. They married the following month, in February 2017. At the time, Isabella worked as a real estate agent, and Lewis owned a small solar panel company. On April 30, 2017, Isabella flew to the Caribbean island of St. Martin to meet Lewis, leaving their 9-month-old daughter with relatives. They planned to spend a week on the water, returning home to Florida on Lewis's sailing catamaran. After stopping in the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, they arrived in Cuba, where they stayed for a few days. On May 14, the catamaran set sail from Varadero, Cuba, bound for Florida. Isabella called her sister 3 hours later to say she would be home the next day. At around 1 a.m., Lewis sent out a distress signal to the U.S. Coast Guard, reporting that his ship had collided with an unknown object and was sinking. He also reported that his wife, Isabella, was missing. A Coast Guard helicopter crew located Lewis in a life raft around 4 a.m. and took him to Key West Island, the southernmost part of Florida. The catamaran was found floating upside down at dawn, but had not yet sunk. During an interview with investigators, Lewis explained that he and Isabella took turns keeping watch. At the time of the accident, it was Isabella's turn, and Lewis was asleep in his stateroom. He woke up to the sound of the collision and rushed on deck, but couldn't find Isabella. He called out her name, but she didn't respond. Lewis suspected that the loose mast might have knocked her overboard. Lewis also stated that the last time he saw Isabella, she was wearing a life jacket. When he was rescued, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer noticed that Lewis's backpack was unusually heavy. Upon inspection, officers found 225 collectible coins in the backpack, but their origin was unclear. Isabella Hellman went missing on May 15, prompting a 4-day search and rescue operation by the Coast Guard. As no signs of her were found, the operation was officially ended on May 18. The authorities were suspicious when Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, requested a letter from the Coast Guard stating that his wife was presumed dead just 24 hours after the search had ended. The Coast Guard denied the request, as it was outside their jurisdiction to issue such a certificate. 6 days later, Lewis announced on TV that he was traveling to Cuba to rent a boat and continue the search for his wife on his own. However, just 3 days after making this statement, Lewis claimed to have already returned from Cuba and met with Isabella's sister, saying he had checked hospitals but found no signs of her. Lewis expressed his despair and resignation to the situation, stating he was struggling to accept that his wife might be gone. He described Isabella as his soul mate and someone he thought he would be with forever. The next day, Lewis and the police attempted to retrieve his daughter from his wife's family, but they refused to relinquish her. Lewis ultimately took custody of his daughter with the help of the police, despite the scandal surrounding him. During the dispute, Isabella's sister repeatedly accused Lewis of being responsible for Isabella's death. Lewis's calm behavior and actions after his wife's disappearance raised suspicions among both Isabella's family and the police. Investigations revealed that Isabella and Lewis had frequent arguments after the birth of their child. Family, friends, and neighbors all confirmed this. Isabella had confided in loved ones that Lewis wanted to move to Australia, but she was opposed to leaving the United States. On May 30th, Lewis gave an interview in which he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance. He claimed they had plans for a happy life together, but now he was alone and their daughter would grow up without a mother. While investigating Isabella's disappearance, the police also looked into the origin of valuable coins found among Lewis's belongings. It was discovered that Lewis had previously worked as a first mate on a yacht. The captain of that yacht had a collection of 617 rare coins worth around $100,000, which was discovered a year earlier. While the yacht was unoccupied and docked in the Caribbean, thieves broke in and stole the coins on board. Although the perpetrator was not caught at the time, the yacht's captain later identified the coins found on Lewis Bennett as part of the stolen loot, now that the FBI was investigating their origin. This new information led the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. Previously, 225 coins had been found among his belongings when he was rescued. On June 16, 2017, the search of his apartment uncovered an additional 162 gold coins hidden in a closet. Meanwhile, Lewis had relocated to England, where his parents lived, and had taken his daughter with him. However, due to financial difficulties, he returned to the United States and settled into an apartment valued at $125,000, while also receiving insurance payments for a lost catamaran. On August 28, 2017, Lewis Bennett was arrested in Florida and charged with stealing coins. He pleaded not guilty. A few days later, a federal judge set his bail at $250,000, which Lewis was unable to pay. As a result, he remained in custody while awaiting trial. Additionally, Lewis attempted to have his wife declared dead. Lewis benefited from his wife Isabella's disappearance by gaining control of their shared property and bank accounts. However, the judge refused to declare Isabella dead twice, as the investigation into her disappearance was ongoing. In a separate case, Lewis pleaded guilty to stealing coins and transporting them to the United States in November 2017. Lewis's parents asked the judge to be lenient when sentencing him, citing the fact that his daughter had already lost her mother. In February 2018, Lewis received a sentence of 7 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation. On the same day, Lewis was charged with second-degree murder in Isabella's death. Authorities believed he intentionally caused the catamaran they were on to crash, which was allegedly a staged event to cover up the crime. The prosecutor's case was based on the claim that Lewis wanted to inherit Isabella's wealth to pay off his debts and take their young daughter to live in Australia. Isabella had expressed fear of her husband in text messages a few months before her death, stating that she felt he no longer respected her. She expressed fear about returning home. In a message sent months before her disappearance, Isabella wrote, "If you no longer like or love me, let's resolve this immediately. It's sad how you treated me the entire time." An inspection of the catamaran before it sank revealed that the portholes below the water line were left open. The damage to the dual hulls seemed to originate from within the vessel, near the water line. The water line is the point where the surface of the water meets the hull of a floating vessel. An expert hired by the FBI analyzed photos and videos taken by the U.S. Coast Guard of the catamaran before it sank. The expert concluded that Lewis's account of the events was not credible. The analysis suggested that the vessel did not sink due to accidental damage, but rather appeared to have been intentionally scuttled. A professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy testified in court that the Coast Guard found no evidence of a collision that could have caused the catamaran to sink. Divers inspecting the vessel were cautious due to the risk of collapse, and eventually, the catamaran sank to a depth of over 4,000 feet, preventing a detailed inspection. 2 years after Isabella Hellman's disappearance, a judge officially declared her dead. Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Scott Suskauer issued a series of orders stating that Isabella was presumed to have died on May 14, 2017. Despite the passage of time, Isabella's body has not been found, and she has not contacted her family. Based on the available evidence, it is presumed that Isabella is deceased. The statement said, in January 2019, U.S. District Judge Federico Moreno suspended Lewis's February sentencing hearing in Miami and rescheduled it for May 28, saying he would not act until Isabella's family could personally visit her daughter Emilia, who turned 3 in July. In November 2019, Lewis pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the second-degree murder charge against him was dropped. Before the plea deal, he faced a possible life sentence for second-degree murder, but the new charges limited his maximum sentence to 8 years in prison. According to a document filed with the court, Lewis claimed he didn't remember what he was doing when he discovered his wife was missing. He didn't search for her on the catamaran or in the water, nor did he use flares to signal for help. Instead, Lewis packed his belongings onto a life raft and then intentionally damaged the catamaran to make it flood, allowing him to escape on the raft. Prosecutors stated that Lewis waited 45 minutes after realizing his wife was missing to call for help. Notably, the U.S. Attorney's Office pointed out that Lewis was an experienced sailor with training in emergency procedures, having previously sailed from St. Martin to Australia. Don't understand why he failed to use his knowledge to respond to the emergency situation. Prosecutor states that Lewis admitted to being negligent in handing over control of the catamaran to his inexperienced wife, Isabella, resulting in her falling overboard and drowning. Despite being an experienced sailor with a Royal Yachting Association certification, Lewis failed to ensure Isabella wore proper safety gear. In contrast, Isabella had no formal sailing training or experience, and Lewis knew it. Lewis received training in emergency procedures, including man-overboard protocols and night sailing safety, but Isabella did not. The prosecutor notes that only Lewis knows the full story of what happened on the catamaran that night. Following Lewis' guilty plea, Isabella's family, through their lawyer, expressed their immense pain and asked Lewis to show remorse. They stated that while Lewis can never undo the harm caused by taking Isabella away, he continues to cause additional pain by depriving them of contact with his and Isabella's daughter, Emilia. Isabella Hellman's family is grieving and missing her dearly. Although they have had limited contact with her daughter Emilia through 3 FaceTime calls, they have not been able to see or hug her in a long time. They long to be reunited with Emilia and provide her with love and care. As a part of their family, they want to be with her. They urged Lewis Bennett to do the right thing. Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, was sentenced to 8 years in prison on May 28, 2019, after pleading guilty to manslaughter in connection with her death. During his sentencing hearing, Bennett apologized sincerely to Isabella's family for putting them through immense pain. He acknowledged that his actions led to a devastating tragedy, for which he is truly remorseful. Lewis admitted to making poor decisions that worsened the situation. He expressed regret in federal court in Miami, where he waived his right to appeal as part of his plea bargain. Before the judge delivered the sentence, Lewis requested the opportunity to be released from prison early so that he could continue to care for their daughter, Emilia. Lewis expressed a desire to care for his daughter, saying, "I want to raise her in a way that honors my late wife's wishes." However, the judge ruled against him, sentencing him to 8 years in prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. As a result, Emilia will remain with her paternal grandparents in England for the time being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana, USA, to carnival workers Lester Likens and his wife Betty Likens, formerly Grimes. She was the third of 5 children, with 2 older twins, Daniel and Diana, and 2 younger twins, Benny and Jenny. Sylvia's youngest sister Jenny had polio, which left her with a significantly weakened leg, causing her to limp noticeably. She had to wear a steel brace on her leg to help her walk. Sylvia's parents had a tumultuous marriage, with constant moving and financial struggles. They worked at carnival booths throughout Indiana during the summer, selling candy, beer, and soft drinks. To help out, the Likens children would often travel with their parents, but Sylvia and Jenny frequently stayed with relatives, mostly their grandmother. This arrangement not only kept the young girls safe, but also allowed them to have a more stable education. From a young age, Sylvia took on various responsibilities, including babysitting, running errands for neighbors and friends, and completing household chores like ironing clothes. In doing so, she earned some money, which she used to buy things for herself and occasionally shared with her mom. Those who knew her described Sylvia as a friendly, confident, and charming girl. She had long, wavy, light brown hair that fell just below her shoulders, and her friends affectionately called her Cookie. Despite her vibrant personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile due to a missing front tooth, which she lost during a childhood accident while playing with one of her brothers. Sylvia loved music, particularly the Beatles, and was very protective of her younger sister Jenny, who was shy and less secure. The sisters frequently visited a local skating rink, where Sylvia would assist Jenny, holding her hand as Jenny relied heavily on her stronger leg. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny Likens were living with their parents in Indianapolis. The following month, their mother was arrested and jailed for theft. Shortly thereafter, their father arranged for his younger daughters to stay with Gertrude Bennett, a mother of two girls, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Likens sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude promised their father that she would care for the girls as if they were her own until his return, which was expected to be just after the 4th of July celebrations. The Likens sisters, Sylvia and Jenny, moved into the Bennett home at 3850 East New York Street. Their father, older brothers, and eventually their mother went on the road with a carnival on the East Coast. As part of the arrangement, Gertrude Bennett would receive $20 a week to care for the sisters until their family returned in November. At first, things seemed normal at the household. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, bonding over their shared love of popular music and helping with household chores. The Likens sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Bennett kids, and the pastor often commended Sylvia for her kindness and respect for sacred matters. However, when the payments for hosting the girls started coming in late, Gertrude's frustration mounted, and she began to mistreat them. This mistreatment involved physical punishments with thick objects, which eventually escalated into regular beatings, starvation, and humiliation. Sylvia faced the brunt of the abuse. Gertrude and her daughter Paula repeatedly accused Sylvia of engaging in inappropriate behavior with boys, which led to Gertrude physically kicking Sylvia in the groin and Paula physically attacking her. The girls were forced to eat food they disliked, and Sylvia was even beaten by Stephanie's boyfriend, Randolph Hubbard. Daily life at the Banfi residence was brutal. Violence escalated over time. Paula's attacks on Sylvia were savage, including punching her in the face and breaking her own wrist. She targeted Sylvia's mouth and eyes, then used her cast to inflict more harm. The sisters faced relentless verbal and psychological abuse, including Gertrude's cruel accusations of promiscuity and forced attacks on each other. The abuse of Sylvia didn't only come from the Banofsky family. Coy Hubbard and his friends would visit Gertrude's home, tormenting Sylvia physically and verbally. Gertrude and her kids would join in, inflicting harm. Neighborhood kids would beat Sylvia, using her as a punching bag, and Gertrude would humiliate her, forcing her to undress and perform sexual acts for their entertainment. Gertrude expelled Sylvia from school as punishment for stealing a gym suit, which Sylvia had done because Gertrude refused to buy her clothes. This cruelty led to severe physical abuse, including beatings with a police belt and kicks to the genitals. Despite Stephanie's attempts to intervene, Gertrude continued to torment them, inflicting further pain by burning their fingertips with matches and whipping them. A few days later, Gertrude again employed the police belt to repeatedly whip Jenny after she allegedly stole a single tennis shoe from school to wear on her stronger foot. Due to the escalating frequency and brutality of the torture and mistreatment, Sylvia gradually became incontinent, a condition for which she was denied access to the bathroom and forced to wet herself as further punishment. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude confined Sylvia to the basement, binding her with rope. She often kept Sylvia naked, providing her with minimal sustenance and frequently denying her water. Sylvia was consistently tied to the stair railing in the basement, her feet barely touching the ground. The Banfi family would occasionally interrupt their physical and emotional torment to watch their favorite TV shows. Neighborhood boys would even pay 5 cents each to view Sylvia's body on display, participating in her humiliation, beating, burning, and mutilation during her captivity in the basement. Gertrude and her children restrained and silenced Sylvia, then submerged her in a bathtub of scorching hot water. Next, they rubbed salt into her injuries. After this incident, an anonymous caller, who was the father of a neighborhood boy named Michael John Monroe, contacted Arsenal School to report that a girl with severe skin lesions was living at the Banvi household. Since Sylvia had been absent from school for several days, a school nurse visited Gertrude's residence to investigate. Gertrude claimed to the nurse that Sylvia had run away from home the previous week and that she was unaware of her current whereabouts. She also alleged that Sylvia's skin lesions were a result of her poor personal hygiene and that she was a negative influence on both her own children and her sister. The school did not pursue any further investigation into Sylvia's whereabouts or well-being. In mid-October, John Benazzi Jr. subjected Sylvia to a cruel and sadistic prank. He offered her a plate of soup, only to swiftly pull it away as she attempted to eat with her hands, which was difficult for her due to her severe malnutrition. Afterwards, Gertrude permitted Sylvia to sleep upstairs, but warned her that she must not wet the bed. Before going to sleep, Sylvia quietly asked Jenny for a glass of water, hoping to avoid dehydration. However, the next morning, Gertrude found that Sylvia had urinated on herself, and as a punishment, forced her to perform a humiliating and degrading act, masturbating with a glass bottle in front of the Banvi children. Shortly thereafter, Gertrude shouted for Sylvia to return to the kitchen, then ordered her to strip naked before proclaiming that she had branded her daughters, and now she was going to brand her. Gertrude began carving the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," onto Sylvia's abdomen with a heated needle. When Gertrude was unable to complete the markings, she instructed 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish etching the words into Sylvia's flesh while she took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. In what Hobbs would later insist were short, light etchings, he continued to brand the text into Sylvia's abdomen as she clenched her teeth and moaned. Richard and 10-year-old Shirley forcibly took Sylvia to the basement. There, they attempted to inflict a burn on Sylvia's body, specifically beneath her left breast, using an anchor bolt to create a mark resembling the letter S. However, due to their mistake of applying part of the loop in reverse, the resulting deep burn scar would instead look like the number 3. On that grim night, after enduring terrible abuse, Sylvia told her sister Jenny that she knew Jenny didn't want her to die, but she was sure she was going to die. The next day, Gertrude woke Sylvia and forced her to write a letter while dictating its contents. The plan was sinister. They intended to deceive Sylvia's parents into believing that Sylvia had run away from the Banvi residence. The content of this letter was intended to frame a group of anonymous local boys for extensively abusing and mutilating Sylvia after she had initially agreed to engage in sexual relations with them. After writing the letter, Sylvia was again tied to the basement stair railing, while Gertrude finalized her plan to abandon her in Jimmy's forest with the help of John Jr. and Jenny. Gertrude offered Sylvia cookies, but she refused, saying, "Give them to the dog, I don't want them." Enraged, Gertrude forced the cookies into Sylvia's mouth, and then she and John brutally beat her, targeting her stomach. On the morning of October 26th, Sylvia's condition had deteriorated. She could hardly speak or control her movements. Gertrude brought her to the kitchen, propping her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk. However, Sylvia struggled to hold the glass, which further infuriated Gertrude, who tossed her to the floor before returning her to the basement. Soon, Sylvia became delirious, repeatedly moaning and muttering incoherently. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia couldn't get past the first 4 letters and was unable to stand up from the floor. Sylvia faced neighborhood bullies in the basement. She pointed out familiar faces, shouting names. After a failed attempt to bite a rotten pear, Jenny reminded her she couldn't feel her teeth, having lost one at 7. Exhausted and desperate, Sylvia tried to escape but collapsed. Gertrude punished her brutally, striking her head and knocking her out. Shortly after, at 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the Banfi residence and rushed to the basement, where he found Stephanie crying and cradling Sylvia's frail, wounded body. After their mother instructed Stephanie to clean Sylvia's body, she and Richard decided to give Sylvia a warm, soothing bath and dress her in fresh clothes. They laid her on a mattress in one of the bedrooms, where she whispered her final wish, for her father to be by her side or to be taken home. After suffering severe punishment and weakening from starvation, Sylvia finally succumbed to her injuries and died. When Stephanie realized Sylvia wasn't breathing, she attempted to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while Gertrude hysterically screamed at the children in the house that Sylvia was faking her own death. Initially, Gertrude struck Sylvia's lifeless body with a book, yelling at her that she was lying and pretending, in a futile attempt to rouse her. Soon, overcome with panic, Gertrude instructed Richard Hobbs to call the authorities from a nearby payphone. When the police arrived at the address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude escorted the officers to the bedroom, where she revealed Sylvia's brutally beaten and mutilated body lying on a dirty mattress. She then handed over the letter that Sylvia had been coerced into writing. Gertrude claimed to have cared for the young girl for over an hour before her death, applying antiseptic to her wounds in a futile attempt at first aid. According to Gertrude, Sylvia had run away from home with a group of teenagers. Returning to her house that afternoon, bare-chested and clutching the note. Having declared to everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was meant to happen, Paula looked at Jenny and calmly said that if Jenny wanted to live with them, they would treat her like their own sister. Following instructions she had received before the police arrived, Jenny recited the rehearsed version of the events leading up to Sylvia's death, before whispering to the officers to take them away, and that she would tell them everything. The formal statement from Jenny Likens led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Benazzi on suspicion of Sylvia's murder just hours after her body was discovered. That same day, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crimes. The 3 older Benazzi children, along with Coy Hubbard, were placed in a nearby juvenile detention center, while the younger Benazzi children and Richard Hobbs were held at the Indianapolis Child Guardians Home, all detained without bail pending trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia's death, but only a day into her detention, she confessed to knowing the children and acknowledged that her daughter Paula and Coy Hubbard had physically and emotionally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing the girl to sleep in the basement on approximately 3 occasions when she had wet the bed. When an officer suggested that the probable reasons for Sylvia's incontinence were her mental distress and kidney injuries, Gertrude became evasive. Paula showed no remorse, signing a statement that admitted to repeatedly beating Sylvia. She also confessed to fracturing Sylvia's wrist and committing other brutal acts, including pushing her down the basement stairs 2 or 3 times. John Jr. confessed to whipping Sylvia once and frequently using his fist to abuse her, also admitting to burning her with matches on multiple occasions. The autopsy of Sylvia's body revealed over 150 separate injuries across her body, and she was severely emaciated at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, nature, severity, and healing stage, including burns, severe bruises, and extensive damage to muscles and nerves. Her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, although an examination determined her hymen was still intact, debunking Gertrude's claims that Sylvia had been 3 months pregnant and the accusations of prostitution and promiscuity. The official cause of Sylvia Marie Likens's death was determined to be a subdural hematoma resulting from a severe blow to the right side of her head. The doctor also noted that the shock she sustained, primarily due to prolonged and severe injury to her skin and subcutaneous tissue, as well as chronic malnutrition, contributed to her demise. By the time her body was discovered, rigor mortis had fully set in, suggesting that she may have been deceased for up to 8 hours prior to discovery. Interestingly, although the autopsy revealed that Sylvia had been recently bathed, possibly post-mortem, this action may have accelerated the loss of body temperature and subsequent onset of rigor mortis. In May 1966, Gertrude Bissesi, her children Paula and John, and 2 neighborhood youths, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted of neglect, torture, and murder in relation to Sylvia's death. Following 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Gertrude Bissesi guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing her to life imprisonment. However, she was paroled in 1985. Paula was convicted of second-degree murder and released in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were found guilty of manslaughter, serving less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27, 1968. In Indiana, the brutal murder and torture of Sylvia Likens is considered the state's worst crime. A seasoned investigator from the Indiana Police Department, with 35 years of experience, described it as the most sadistic case he had ever encountered. Sylvia tragically lost her life on October 26th in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Her parents were expected to return for her and her sister in November, but unfortunately, Sylvia passed away before their arrival. Sylvia and her sister Jenny lived in fear of reporting the escalating abuse and neglect to family members or school authorities. They worried that speaking out would worsen their already desperate situation. Jenny, in particular, struggled to overcome the urge to inform family members, fearing that Gertrude would retaliate by subjecting her to the same torture and abuse as her sister. Additionally, Jenny faced harassment from neighborhood girls who ridiculed and occasionally beat her whenever she mentioned Sylvia's situation. The middle-aged Bissesi couple, along with other families in the neighborhood, had suspicions or had witnessed signs of the girls being mistreated, but they were too afraid to report it to the authorities. Consequently, no one intervened to stop the abuse the Sylvia sisters suffered, and tragically, no one was able to rescue them from their horrific ordeal in time. In the aftermath, all those responsible for her torture and murder received prison sentences, although some did not serve their full terms. However, they cannot escape the guilt and horror they inflicted, which will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Gerardo couple. In the tranquil suburbs of Delaware County, Pennsylvania, the lives of Jennifer and Mark Gerardo appeared to mirror the idyllic setting. Professionally successful and socially accomplished, they seemed to be living the American dream. However, their story took an unforeseen and tragic turn that would shatter the calm of their suburban existence. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, Jennifer and Mark, both accomplished individuals, harbored complexities that would evolve into a narrative of betrayal and heartbreak. Jennifer Gerardo was born Jennifer Cox on December 19, 1970, in the city of Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, USA. She grew up in the area until her late teenage years and was a graduate of Bishop Lewis High School, where she took advanced courses. Jennifer first attended Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, where she studied communication and was deeply involved in the theater arts and performance program at the college. She also continued with her studies in communication at Butler University, earning her BA degree in communication and theater arts. Throughout her life, She held several jobs related to marketing for several companies in the Indiana area, working in the city of Carmel and also Indianapolis, and was the marketing manager at Circor Instrumentation for several years. In the summer of 1986, Jennair Cox and Mark Gerardo first met in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They were both teenagers at the time, and Jennair worked at a Taco Bell in Fort Wayne. Mark said he was immediately attracted to Jennair from the moment they met. He commented on how her beautiful blue eyes and big smile had taken his breath away. He was kind of tongue-tied and couldn't speak. Their romance didn't begin until 4 years later, after Mark ran into Jennair again and found out that she was working at a nearby mall. He started visiting her often, and one day, she pressed him to make a move, asking him when he was going to take her out. He said he was quite shy. It was this honesty that drew Mark to Jennair. Mark said that Jennair was confident and unafraid to speak her mind, adding that her demeanor was the exact opposite of his. Melissa Murphy, a childhood friend of Jennair, said she remembered when Jennair met Mark, and she said, "This is the one," and was so excited that she could do anything for Mark. On October 23, 1993, Mark and Jennair got married. Mark was 25 years old, and Jennair was 23 years old, and together they established a relationship that began in their adolescence and carried them into adulthood. Mark said, "We were happy. I couldn't imagine not being with Jennair for the rest of my life." Just like any other relationship, Mark and his partner Jennair had to deal with low points in their marriage. He said that his arguments with his wife could be intense and that she would always have the last word. In November 2011, they both moved to Greenville, South Carolina, where they found new jobs in marketing. The new environment and their frequent exploration of the state's beautiful mountains and beaches brought a sense of restoration to their marriage, which had become stronger than before. Everything went well for the next few years, until 2017, when their renewed life in South Carolina came to a halt. Jennair had been laid off from her job and was having difficulty finding a new one. She lost confidence in herself and became much less strong than she had once been. Around this time, the couple decided it was time to search for new opportunities and a new beginning elsewhere. They finally decided that Delaware would be their new home, and Mark immediately began his search for a job opportunity. He saw that the University of Delaware was hiring a creative director in its marketing department, and if successful, he would be the supervisor. He sent an email applying for the role and received an instant message back from a woman 15 years his junior, who would be his new boss, offering him an interview. His concerns about being managed by a younger woman subsided almost immediately. Meredith Chapman was a 33-year-old native of Pennsylvania. She had a bachelor's degree in communication and a master's degree in education from the University of Delaware. Meredith was married to Luke, a former New York City councilman, and they lived in Fairfield Crest, Delaware. When Mark attended the interview, he was immediately attracted to Meredith, not only for her beauty, but also for her exceptional intelligence. Within 5 minutes of sitting across the desk from her, he thought to himself that he wanted to work for her. He was impressed by her articulation, energy, passion for the job, and her accomplishments at her young age. It seemed that Meredith was also impressed by Mark, as she immediately offered him the job, which he gratefully accepted. Mark moved to Wilmington, Delaware, in November 2017, while his wife stayed behind in South Carolina, temporarily, to lease their home. Mark was excited not only because of moving to the north, but also to see growth in his career, not knowing that this would be the beginning of the end of his marriage with Jennair. Mark spent his first 45 days living alone in Delaware, as his wife remained behind to arrange for their home to be rented out. During this time, Mark said he got to know Meredith well, and also stated that the two had a lot in common. One day, Meredith had asked him out for a drink, and Mark remembered the events of that night. He found it easy to talk to Meredith, and before they had gone home, he spoke to her about his marriage to Jennair. even if it was not necessarily in a negative way. He also told Meredith about losing his parents and his brother. Mark didn't know what was transpiring, stating, "I really didn't know what was happening." He went on to say, "I knew it felt amazing to be around Meredith, and I was confused by the feelings I was having, to be honest, until it became a little bit more forward with a dinner that we had. It was more of a date." Mark said the issues with his marriage also came into focus when he was with Meredith. It was during this time that Mark started comparing Meredith to his wife. He stated that Meredith started telling him that he was good at what he does and how wonderful a man he was, something he said he had never heard from his wife's lips. Mark was hopelessly in love, stating that, "Just made an impression on me. Here's this woman I think is amazing, saying that she thinks I'm a wonderful man." 1 month after meeting Meredith, Mark said that they kissed for the first time. He further stated that while he felt a strong connection, he immediately felt guilty for betraying his wife and told Meredith that whatever was about to happen couldn't be because he cared for his wife. Nonetheless, he soon realized that he also couldn't give up on the feelings he was developing for Meredith, who he said had told him she was 9 years into an unhappy marriage herself. Mark said, "I felt enthralled. The connection was so strong that shutting it down just didn't feel right. I had to at least find out what it was that drew us together before Janae had joined her." Janae moved north, and Mark sensed he was distant. It wasn't long before she confronted him about her feeling that there could be another woman. Mark said she finally asked him, "What is up with you? You're acting different." He continued, "She said specifically, 'It's Meredith, isn't it?'" This was after Mark had mentioned Meredith several times when speaking about his new job. Although her husband denied the affair at first, Janae would not let it go. She continued to question his relationship with Meredith, aware that there was something between the two. Janae began to pay attention to her husband, making sure she knew what he was up to at any given time. He further said that Janae mysteriously knew things about him and Meredith, and he couldn't understand how she knew them. Close to Valentine's Day 2018, Janae finally obtained the evidence she had been seeking. However, Mark's admission of an affair with Meredith came at the cost of Janae revealing that she had hired a company to gain access to his phone, allowing her to read his text messages, view his photos, and review his call records with Meredith. Mark admitted the truth to Janae, acknowledging that he had indeed fallen for Meredith, as he could no longer maintain the deception. Heartbroken but unwilling to give up on her marriage, Janae asked Mark to attend marriage counseling, which he agreed to. But on the day of their second session, Mark said he was putting on his jacket when he felt something bulging in the lining of his coat. Even though at first, he believed it to be an anti-theft device that had been left inside, he decided to cut the jacket open and discovered a recording device, and with its lights already flashing, it was recording him at that very moment. At that particular time, Mark was very furious and went ahead and confronted his wife. From then on, the relationship between Mark and Janae would fall apart at an accelerated rate. Finally, Mark told Janae that he planned on filing for divorce in May of 2018, after he had met Delaware residency requirements and could move out of their shared house. During this time, things were going well, particularly for Meredith Chapman, who had been offered a new job as the assistant vice president at Villanova University in Pennsylvania and moved to Braddock Township, Pennsylvania, which is part of the Mainline region. Meredith and her husband were getting divorced as well, so that she could continue to follow her new relationship with Mark, and they could, in the end, be together, as Meredith and Mark's relationship continued to grow. Janae started to see divorce lawyer Sheila Brennan, who said Janae had a lot of bitterness and anger about being abandoned and replaced by a younger woman. Janae also had many fears about being left financially insecure, since she had just moved to a new location and had not found a new job a year after losing her previous one. Things seemed to worsen for Jenner, and finally, all this had destroyed her mental health. Mark recommended that she see a psychiatrist and also asked her to seek support from family and friends, as she had even threatened to jump out of a window. Mark said she took the advice and seemed to have accepted the impending divorce. Jenner approached her husband one day with a list of requests for the weeks leading up to him officially moving out. Mark said he believed that they had gotten through the worst things, but little did he know that this was far from the truth, and the worst was yet to come. Among the items on her list were going on hikes, having dinner, and generally spending some time together. Mark agreed to play along with Jenner's requests, stating it was odd. Over the next few weeks, Jenner also began posting on the neighborhood app Nextdoor, asking for recommendations for an excellent marriage counselor for a couple on the verge of divorce. She wrote, "We will need someone who is very educated and experienced in dealing with couples' issues, including infidelity, depression, traumatic experiences, child-parent dynamics, and being accountable for one's actions." However, unbeknownst to others, Jenner had been secretly planning her revenge. On the evening of April 23, 2018, Mark and Jenner were scheduled to meet for dinner to discuss their divorce agreement. However, in a series of messages, Jenner informed her husband, who was already at the restaurant, that she was running late. Before sending another text telling him to go home, she said she wouldn't be able to make it. As Mark got up to leave minutes later, he received a picture from Jenner. The picture showed trash with a condom in the middle, which led him to believe she was searching through Meredith's trash can outside her home. Then he received more text messages, one of which read, "You ruined my life." The next two messages from Jenner said, "I hope you never find happiness," and "Goodbye, Mark." Mark repeatedly attempted to contact Meredith via text and phone calls, driven by concerns for her safety and fears about what Jenner might do to her. Regrettably, all his efforts to communicate went unanswered. He rushed to Meredith's house, anticipating a confrontation between Jenner and Meredith. However, upon arriving, he encountered a situation far worse than he could have imagined. He found Meredith lying face down on her kitchen floor, surrounded by a pool of blood around her head. Nearby, he also discovered his wife's lifeless body on the floor. Mark recounted that it took him only 5 seconds to let out a profane scream and run to her, where he continued, "I just said baby, oh baby, what have you done?" Meredith had enthusiastically posted on her Instagram account about her new position at Villanova, just less than 2 hours before her death. She expressed her excitement about starting the job just a week prior, and the warm welcome she had already received from the Villanova community. Later that evening, Meredith arrived at her home on Lowry Lane in Radnor Township, parked her Audi in the driveway, and went straight inside, unaware that Jenner had broken in and was hiding, waiting to attack her. One of Meredith's neighbors, Tim Mv, said he heard the commotion and went out to investigate, and Mark told him to call 911. Sergeant Christopher Ford of the Radnor Township Police Department said the call filled him with dread, as they don't usually receive that type of call. When they arrived at the scene, it was quite chaotic, with numerous officers present. Mark, who appeared to be breathing heavily, was placed in the back of an ambulance before being taken to the police station as a suspect. After interrogating him and discovering that the gun used in the two deaths was under Jenner's body, the police determined that she had broken into Meredith's home, murdered her, and then taken her own life. One day after the murder-suicide, the police received a tip from a person who said they had seen a woman wearing a trench coat, hat, sunglasses, and possibly a wig, looking out at the house with binoculars. The police had also collected a set of car keys from the crime scene, which they determined belonged to a Cadillac that Jenner had rented. Mark said learning about the Cadillac came as a surprise, and he found out most of this information from the police and the news. Jenner had rented the Cadillac 2 weeks before the tragedy, and it was parked right outside their apartment. Mark continued to dig, poring over his wife's bank statements, phone records, and her computer backup, and found out that she was living a double life. After Mark admitted to the affair, just after Valentine's Day, Jenner opened up a secret bank account and credit cards, where she used the credit cards to purchase audio surveillance equipment, a lock-picking kit, computer hacking software, and DNA testing kits for his clothes. Mark also said she even bought sophisticated GPS tracking systems and attached them to both his and Meredith's cars. Mark stated that he believes there were over 400 images of private conversations he and Meredith had through text and Snapchat. Jenner would actually access his phone in the middle of the night. Mark continued that his best guess is that Jenner gained access while he was sleeping on the couch, and she placed his thumb on the thumb reader on March 20th, 2018, 5 weeks before the murder-suicide. Jenner's credit card statements revealed that she had practiced shooting the gun 3 times at a firing range. Mark said Jenner had planted multiple devices in his clothes and that he found files containing hundreds of hours of audio that his wife had recorded and even transcribed. Mark continued that Jenner had taken all his jackets and was cycling through a multitude of devices, sewing them in and out, downloading them back and forth, and she had been doing this for weeks. It came to light that on the night Jenner killed Meredith and herself, she had emailed a letter to her family members, explaining her motive in a very chilling manner. She had started writing the letter weeks in advance, dating her entries, and expressing that this was a payback for what he had done to her. A psychotherapist who studied homicide within marriages and read Jenner's letter suggested that Jenner may have been pushed to kill Meredith and herself because losing the love of her life was something she could not tolerate. The psychotherapist stated that there was something about listening to the tapes that triggered rage and wound her up, and that at some point, when she gave up on life and became suicidal, that's when she became her most dangerous. The psychotherapist got the sense that all of this was done to make him suffer, and that Jenner was interested in being the judge and jury in this scenario of her own life and her husband's life. In a televised TV interview, Mark revealed how his wife left a 15-page letter stating how she would have killed him too, had he walked in on the crime. Since the event, Mark said he wishes he handled the breakup with his wife differently, and that his regret comes back to breaking her heart and making her feel like she had no other choice. Mark said he has driven past Meredith's home several times as a way of trying to move forward, and has helped him come to terms with what happened so that he can let it go. The shockwaves of this story echoed through the neighborhood, leaving friends and neighbors grappling with the aftermath of a narrative that transcended the boundaries of typical suburban life. In the aftermath, the community came together, seeking solace and understanding, and grappling with the questions that lingered in the wake of this complex and heartbreaking tale. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wilma Anderson. On November 14, 2019, a 17-year-old girl named Wilma Anderson disappeared after visiting her ex-boyfriend, Tishko Ahmed, in Uddevalla, Sweden. Wilma had gone to retrieve her belongings after their breakup, but this would be the last time she was seen alive. As the investigation progressed, the detectives' findings shocked everyone. This is the haunting case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson was born to Linda and Marcus Anderson. However, due to family struggles and their divorce, Wilma was unable to live with either parent. Despite this, her mother remained deeply involved in her life, while Wilma stayed with her sister, Emily, whom their mother described as a vibrant and future-minded girl. Wilma was a sociable person, surrounded by an active social circle that filled her days. She adored social media, frequently sharing snapshots of her life on Facebook, and relished every opportunity to be captured in photographs, showcasing her innate creativity and unwavering spirit. At the age of 15, Wilma met a 20-year-old man named Tishko Ahmed Shabazz, in Sweden. Despite the 5-year age difference, there were no legal obstacles to their relationship, as the age of consent in Sweden is 15. Wilma's mother had reservations about her daughter dating an older individual, but reluctantly accepted her choice, trusting her daughter's judgment. Tishko, originally from Iraq, had relocated to Sweden at the age of 8, residing with his father and stepmother. Accounts from Tishko's friend depicted a school life marked by bullying, but as he matured, he developed an unwavering resolve, refusing to back down from any challenge he faced. He gained his Swedish citizenship in 2014 and eventually found employment in the care sector after completing his education in 2018. Wilma and Tishko took a significant step, moving in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. Initially, their relationship was smooth, but it eventually shifted, taking a darker and more troubling turn. Tishko's demeanor grew increasingly controlling, a change that did not escape Wilma's mother, who had noticed her daughter's altered behavior over the 2 years spent with her boyfriend. Wilma frequently confided in her sister Emily about the turbulent relationship with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, while on the phone with Emily, Wilma revealed her intention to end the relationship during her visit to Tishko's apartment to collect her belongings. She expressed her exhaustion with Tishko's incessant control over her life, dictating what she wore, where she went, who she talked to, and even her makeup. Feeling suffocated by his domineering and abusive behavior, she had had enough and simply wanted it to end. Upon Tishko's return from work, Wilma ended the call, saying she had to go, possibly wanting to conclude what had brought her to Tishko's apartment. Sadly, this would be the last time her sister or any of her loved ones would hear from her. Later, Emily desperately tried to contact her sister, but the calls went unanswered. The following day, November 15th, Wilma had a dentist appointment, but she didn't show up. On November 17th, Wilma's worried parents went to the apartment she shared with her boyfriend. After knocking for what felt like a long time, the door finally opened, revealing Tishko. Linda, deeply concerned, questioned Tishko about Wilma's whereabouts, noticing his distant demeanor. She suspected he might have been under the influence, but she and her husband persisted, determined to get answers. Tishko admitted that their relationship had ended, claiming Wilma had left after collecting her belongings, and that he had no idea where she was currently, adding that he didn't expect to reconnect with her anytime soon. They entered the apartment, hoping to further investigate the situation by having a brief conversation. Tishko recounted the evening's events to Wilma's parents, a heated argument that had occurred upon his return from work around 5:30 p.m., which led to Wilma leaving their relationship. Initially, Tishko and Wilma had an unpredictable and on-and-off relationship, primarily due to Tishko's behavior towards Wilma. Her parents were not overly alarmed at first, as this was not an unusual occurrence. Meanwhile, Emily, Wilma's sister, was deeply concerned and turned to Facebook, urgently seeking information about her missing sister. Emily's post detailed Wilma's disappearance since November 14th, emphasizing the lack of communication, which was a stark deviation from Wilma's habitual contact with her family. Emily described Wilma's physical appearance, highlighting her height of 165 centimeters, her dark hair with blonde highlights, and expressed the distress at her sudden disappearance, a departure from her usual behavior. The police promptly filed a report and started collecting statements from family and friends, determined to trace Wilma's last known interactions. They investigated who had recently spoken to or seen the missing girl. Linda and Emily confirmed they had not had any contact with Wilma since November 14th, and their calls had remained unanswered. Joining forces, a search party was assembled, blending police efforts with the support of friends and family, and utilizing police dogs and drone technology to search inaccessible areas for any trace of Wilma. When authorities approached Tishko, he claimed and asserted that he had no knowledge of Wilma's whereabouts, and neither had he received any recent communication from her. By Sunday, November 17th, 3 days into the search, the the concerning silence from Wilma still persisted. Wilma, who was typically active on social media, had now gone silent for an alarming period. The urgency increased as around 5,000 people came together fervently, joining the search in a collective effort to find her. The police persistently returned to Tishko, seeking information, but he steadfastly maintained his ignorance about Wilma's whereabouts. His claims suggested that after their breakup, she had moved on to another man. However, this supposed narrative lacked any substantiated evidence, leaving her friends and family baffled and in the dark. Concurrently, Wilma's family revealed a distressing narrative to the authorities. They lamented how their daughter's life had taken a drastic downturn since her involvement with Tishko Ahmed, painting a stark contrast to her once vibrant and sociable self. Linda unveiled the pervasive control Tishko had exerted over her, dictating her every move and scrutinizing her whereabouts. Emily disclosed Wilma's unsettling revelations, where she admitted to Tish's violent behavior in the final stages of their relationship. Despite the turmoil, Wilma still harbored a deep affection for Tishko. Tishko had gone to great lengths by installing a GPS device on Wilma's phone, allowing him constant monitoring of her location at all times. A series of text messages between Wilma and Tishko revealed the disturbing reality of Tishko's controlling behavior. In one exchange from a previous argument, Wilma had pleaded, "Contact me when you think you can trust me," to which Tishko had responded, "Contact me when you know your place." The police, intent on uncovering the truth, delved into Tishko's final movements. Tishko adamantly claimed he hadn't left the apartment after arriving home from work at 5 p.m. Authorities wanted to make sure he was telling the truth, and therefore retraced Tish's movements by tracking his phone's GPS. CCTV footage had captured Tishko at a supermarket around 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma disappeared. He then returned home from work by 5 p.m. Neighbors recounted a heated, escalating argument between the couple at around 6 p.m., an occurrence not uncommon, but this one was louder than the usual ones. Concerned, one neighbor ventured to check on them, only to encounter an eerie silence, just as they neared to knock on the apartment door. No one was arguing anymore. It was dead silent. This strange silence prompted unease, but the neighbor, confused about what to do next, just retreated to their apartment. The police meticulously pieced together Tishko's movements, extending their investigation to his workplace and the company vehicle he used, requesting forensic testing on it. The GPS in the car revealed his movements from Thursday the 14th to Monday the 18th, indicating visits to clients interspersed with returns to his own residence throughout his usual work hours during those days. On the day of the heated argument, Tishko's phone revealed that he left his apartment around 6:30 p.m. as dusk settled. Witnesses spotted him striding along the freeway, a solitary figure shrouded in all-black attire. A passing motorcyclist described him as visibly distant, lost in his thoughts. Law enforcement intercepted Tishko and escorted him. Upon questioning, Tishko explained that his intention was to catch a train, but he changed his mind and decided to take a contemplative walk home instead. However, an official report was never filed, leaving a gap in the recorded events on November 19, 2019. The unfolding events led to Tishko's arrest. He had visible scratches on his forearms, and a search of his apartment uncovered unsettling clues. Wilma's belongings, including her bag and coat, were hanging in their usual places. Further discoveries awaited investigators that Tuesday night, as her shoes and eyeglasses were also found. Linda emphasized her daughter's attachment to her bag. The examination revealed a trail of bloodstains splattered across the walls and floors of every room, suggesting a violent struggle throughout the apartment. As the investigators pieced together the evidence, a sinister narrative emerged. Traces of blood trailed from the living room to the bedroom, painting a haunting picture of something being dragged. The bed bore a grim imprint, a haunting shape of a torso, highlighted by the revealing glow of blue star. The discovery of muscle tissue on a knife and splattered across the living room wall only added to the gruesome mosaic of the crime scene. The sheer amount of blood found suggested a scene of extreme violence, making survival unlikely. Outside the apartment, the search continued, uncovering trash bags containing Tishko's bedding, stained with clear signs of blood. Confronted at the police station, Tishko was presented with the incriminating evidence, which he promptly denied any knowledge of, firmly asserting that he would be aware of any substantial bloodshed in his own residence. Meanwhile, the quest to find Wilma intensified, with an ever-growing throng of individuals rallying daily, determined to aid in her search, fueling hope amidst the encroaching darkness of the unfolding tragedy. The apartment where Wilma was last seen turned into a stark crime scene, yet all attempts to establish contact with her remained fruitless. Then, on November 28th, 2 weeks since Wilma vanished without a trace, cadaver dogs were enlisted for assistance at the crime scene. These trained canines, specialized in detecting scents associated with deceased individuals, ventured into the bedroom and swiftly signaled a chilling indication. A deceased person or human remains had likely been in that very area. Moreover, a distinct odor permeated the apartment, heightening the grim atmosphere. Despite prior searches, the police meticulously re-examined the bedroom, drawn to the area marked by the dogs. Their focus honed in on a wardrobe, seemingly just another piece of furniture in the room. Yet within that innocuous wardrobe lay a small travel case, seemingly inconspicuous among the room's contents. Although previously overlooked, the officers, driven by instinct, seized the case, poised to uncover its secrets. Inside, investigators discovered a large object concealed within aluminum kitchen foil, a harrowing revelation met with bloodstains in the case's interior. As they cautiously unraveled the foil's contents, a heart-wrenching and shocking reality awaited them. Wilma's decapitated head lay shrouded within. The head had been wrapped meticulously and bound with tape, and the travel case had become a repository of the horrifying events that had happened to Wilma. The case was dispatched to Gothenburg's forensic labs for further testing, where detailed examination revealed Tishko's fingerprints, an ominous connection tying him to the heinous act. Additionally, at the crime scene where the thrown-away garbage bags were found, a footstep marked with Wilma's blood showed Tishko's clear footprint. The sad discoveries revealed the savageness of the crime. Medical examiners, although not able to definitively determine the reason for Wilma's death, pointed out serious head and eye wounds caused by a harsh blow. The horrific act of cutting off her head resulted in additional injuries to her head. Wilma's heartbroken family learned the heartbreaking truth about their daughter's destiny. Linda, driven by strong determination, joined the search operations, no longer looking for their missing loved one, but sadly hunting for the rest of Wilma's remains. The family, thrown into the worst of nightmares, faced the shocking details emerging from the proof found in the walls of the apartment. A dreadful truth came to light. Wilma's final moments probably took place in the living room where she was subjected to a violent attack. Her world was shattered by a devastating head strike, leaving behind a haunting trace of violence. The Swedish authorities filed a report that detailed Tishko's denial of Andersson's murder, vehemently asserting his innocence. His unsettling statement echoed, insisting on a warped sense of affection, which he claimed, "You forget that this is a girl that I have loved, and that I have lived my life perfectly. If I had murdered my girl, I would not have saved her head." Law enforcement had secured ample evidence to press charges against Tishko, and his trial was set for May 2020. However, Wilma's body remained undiscovered throughout the entire court proceedings. Shabazz, devoid of any display of remorse or emotion, stood stoic amidst the relentless investigation. Reports surfaced painting a disturbing picture of his beliefs, allegations that he viewed his ex-girlfriend as a figure of malevolence, associating her with Satan and espousing outlandish claims of her collaboration with Democrats against the then US President, Donald Trump. His bizarre hero worship of the president even led to a failed attempt to join Trump's campaign, halted due to inadequate entry documents. attempts to plead not guilty by reason of insanity during the trial, by citing these absurd beliefs and claims of Wilma as proof of insanity by his defense, fell short. On July 27, 2020, the verdict sealed Tishko's fate. The court pronounced 23-year-old Tishko Shabazz Ahmed guilty of 17-year-old Wilma Anderson's murder, handing down a life sentence, which was later reduced to 18 years by the Court of Appeal. The baffling reduction of the sentence stemmed from the absence of concrete evidence pinpointing the exact cause of Wilma's demise, or the sequence of events due to the absence of her body, a haunting absence that left critical questions unanswered, hindering the pursuit of justice. In late 2020, Wilma's funeral brought a solemn closure to this tragic saga, a heart-wrenching conclusion that undoubtedly plunged Wilma's family into unfathomable sorrow. Our deepest sympathies go out to the life lost too soon and the grieving loved ones she left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rowena Irani. On October 3rd, 2016, Rowena failed to show up to pick up her mother from work, which was highly unusual. Concerned when they were unable to reach her by phone, her mother decided to get a ride home from a co-worker. Upon arriving, she found Rowena lying on the floor, bleeding profusely. She immediately contacted emergency services, and Rowena was rushed to the hospital, but tragically, she passed away the following day. During the investigation, your brother was brought in for questioning and directed them to a possible suspect who had shown red flags throughout this tragic case. Rowena Irani was born on February 18, 1994, in Karachi, Pakistan, to Tehran and Beham Irani. In 2004, when Rowena was 10 years old, the family moved to Wichita, Kansas, seeking better opportunities. The aftermath of the 9/11 tragedy cast a shadow of prejudice on the Irani family, and Rowena and her older brother, Rushad, faced challenges in making friends due to this hostility. Despite the initial difficulties, they gradually found their place and expanded their social circles. Rowena thrived and blossomed into a determined, sociable, and compassionate young woman. She graduated from Wichita Heights High School in 2012 and immediately enrolled at Wichita State University, pursuing a psychology degree with the aspiration of obtaining a master's degree and becoming a counselor for teenagers. Rowena worked at the Wichita Children's Home, a facility that provided refuge for neglected, abused, and emotionally distressed youth. She formed deep connections with the children under her care and demonstrated her remarkable ability to empathize with and support them. In May 2016, Rowena reconnected with an old family friend, a man named Danny Thomas Owens, who had enlisted in the U.S. Army after finishing high school, but had his military service abruptly halted due to a severe traumatic brain injury. Rowena and Danny quickly formed a romantic connection, but concerning behaviors soon emerged regarding Dan's possessive tendencies, controlling attitude, and explosive anger issues. Despite Rowena's reservations, Dan became fixated on the idea of marrying her and starting a family right away, even though Rowena, at 22, expressed her desire to focus on completing her college education before considering such a serious commitment. Danny's insistence on marriage and his intensity alarmed Rowena, making her feel the relationship was progressing too rapidly. When Rowena asked for some space early on in the relationship, Danny responded with a deeply unsettling and desperate letter, pleading for her not to leave him, professing his inability to live without her, and disturbingly hinting at self-harm. Rowena broke up with Danny first because she wasn't ready for marriage and starting a family. After she told him this in person, he seemed to understand and give her some space. However, just a week later, he started pressuring her again about getting engaged, planning the wedding, and future family plans. His actions made it seem like he saw Rowena more as a conquest and fantasy rather than an equal partner. He was trying to limit her to just a domestic role instead of supporting her education and career. This imbalance in their relationship worried Rowena and made her question their compatibility. In September 2016, Danny's aggression had become so severe that Rowena felt the need to share her concerns with her brother, Rashad, who was a police officer. Rowena told Rashad about troubling incidents involving Danny, including his accounts of brutal killings he said he had committed during his military service, even bragging about killing women and children in Afghanistan. These shocking revelations deeply troubled Rowena. Additionally, Danny revealed his plans to kill an ex-girlfriend who had broken up with him, admitting he was vengeful and unstable after the breakup, seriously considering her murder. Rashad agreed with Rowena that Dan was a real threat and warned that he seemed capable of carrying out violent acts against her. On September 23rd, Rowena decided to end her relationship with Dan and cut off all communication with him due to his emotionally abusive behavior and concerning actions. Danny's response to this was to plan revenge instead of respecting Rowena's decision. After undergoing shoulder surgery and being unable to handle a firearm properly due to his recovery, Dan, driven by anger, bought a .45 caliber handgun. Subsequently, on October 3rd, more than a week after their breakup, Dan secretly showed up at Rowena's house while her family was out. Security cameras caught Danny parking his car away from the Irani family residence before sneakily approaching in broad daylight, his arm in a sling to hide the illegal gun he was carrying. He entered through an unlocked door and waited for Rowena to show up. When the 22-year-old unsuspectingly entered the room, he aimed and shot her in the head without warning. This ruthless, violent act against someone he claimed to deeply care for was not a crime of passion, but a cold and calculated murder by an obsessively controlling abuser. After Rowena was shot in a cold-blooded manner, Danny quickly left the scene through the back door of the house and drove away in a hurry to avoid getting caught. On his way, he stopped at different ponds across Wichita to dispose of crucial evidence, such as the handgun magazine and Rowena's cell phone, both of which he had taken in an attempt to hide his actions. Meanwhile, Rowena was left alone, suffering from serious injuries and bleeding heavily in her home until around 4 p.m. When Rowena's mother returned home after being dropped off, she was confused by her daughter not being there to pick her up. As she usually did, unable to reach Rowena on the phone, she got a ride from a coworker to their family home. Upon arrival, she was met with a horrifying scene. Rowena was lying motionless on the floor in a pool of blood, with a severe head injury. Frantically, Rowena's mother called emergency services, but it was too late. Rowena's condition was critical due to the gunshot wound and significant blood loss. Rowena fought for her life at Wesley Medical Center for nearly 24 hours, while her family held on to hope, waiting for a miracle. Sadly, death took her on October 4th at the young age of 22. A promising life, taken by a senseless act of violence. Rowena's family, despite their deep sorrow, were determined to seek justice for her murder. They quickly urged investigators to concentrate on Danny Owens, Rowena's former boyfriend who had caused her fear. Danny was promptly found and questioned. After being arrested and taken to the police station, Danny admitted to holding a grudge against Rowena for breaking up with him. Despite trying to explain that Rowena's death was accidental during intense questioning, evidence proved his claim to be false. In his account to investigators, Danny explained that he spontaneously visited Rowena's residence with the intention of discussing the possibility of reconciling their relationship, hoping to achieve closure. He admitted to arriving unannounced while carrying a loaded .45 caliber pistol, though he claimed the firearm was concealed within his arm sling and that he never had any explicit intention of threatening or harming Rowena. Danny asserted that Rowena suddenly surprised him by turning a corner, causing him to reflexively flinch due to his PTSD from military service. In this panicked moment, he alleged that he accidentally discharged a round in her direction, tragically striking Rowena in the head and causing her to collapse lifeless to the ground. Overwhelmed by panic, he fled the scene and later disposed of the evidence. The detectives dismissed his claim that the shooting was accidental and instead believed it was a carefully planned murder carried out by a vengeful ex-partner. This belief was based on evidence such as security footage, his admission of sneaking up on Rowena with a loaded gun, the attempt to get rid of evidence, and the gunshot wound to the victim's head. In November 2018, Danny Owens went to trial for the brutal murder of Rowena in Wichita. The prosecution presented a strong case with plenty of evidence, both direct and circumstantial, leaving no doubt. They created a story that portrayed Danny as possessive and controlling, leading to violence when he couldn't handle rejection in his fantasies, which tragically resulted in Rowena's death. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Danny guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary. He was sentenced to life in prison in Kansas for his heartless act of ending Rowena's life out of wounded pride. Danny will not be able to seek parole for 25 years, and it is unlikely he will be released considering the brutality of his crimes. According to official court documents, he is presently confined to a prison cell at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Hutchinson, Kansas. Reflecting on the tragic story of Rowena Irani, we are faced with the harsh reality of domestic violence and its destructive outcomes. Rowena's life was ended by someone she once cared for deeply, showing us how vital it is to notice warning signs and seek help in abusive relationships. It is crucial that we come together to help victims of domestic abuse and ensure that abusers are held accountable for their actions. Let Rowena's story remind us that love should never be mixed with fear or violence. May her memory motivate us to foster positive, respectful relationships and work towards a world where everyone feels secure and appreciated. It is sad and unfortunate what this monster did to Rowena. She lost her life at a young age with so much ahead of her. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victim whose life was tragically cut short and the loved ones she left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The heartbreaking case of Heather Elvis. Heather Rell Elvis was born on June 30th, 1993, in Horry County, South Carolina, to Terry and Debbie Elvis. She was described as a determined, vibrant, and free-spirited individual with a big personality. Heather enjoyed doing makeup and aspired to pursue it as a career. She was a talented, cheerful, and seemingly happy 20-year-old girl. Heather was very artistic and often shared her thoughts and interests on social media. She was known to be somewhat rebellious, living her life the way she wanted, without caring much about what others thought of her. After graduating from St. James High School in Murrells Inlet in 2011, and eager to experience her independence, her parents allowed her to move into an apartment in Myrtle Beach with her best friend Brianna. To support herself while studying cosmetology, Heather had 2 part-time jobs, one at the House of Blues in North Myrtle Beach, and the other at a Scottish-themed restaurant called the Tilted Kilt in Myrtle Beach. She had a good job, great friends, and a tight-knit family, and everything in her life seemed to be on track. However, like every 20-year-old girl, she had secrets and things that her family did not know about, and would not find out about until it was too late. One day in the summer of 2013, Heather was working her regular shift at the Tilted Kilt when an older man caught her eye. This man was Sidney Mora, the restaurant's maintenance worker. Sidney was a 37-year-old married man with 3 children. His wife Tammy was a 40-year-old stay-at-home mother and a part-time travel agent whom he had been married to since 1997. Sidney owned his own maintenance company and would come to the restaurant to repair things in the kitchen. It was no secret that Heather had a crush on Sidney, even though he was much older, and the two of them would engage in harmless flirting at work. Heather would tell her friend Brianna about their interactions and how smitten she was with this man. Heather, who was also very active on her social media accounts, was open about expressing her feelings towards Sidney. It became clear that Sydney was also attracted to Heather, and the two began a romantic relationship. Sydney would often bring Heather coffee and bagels when she was at work, even on his days off. They would text each other frequently, and the relationship soon became physical. Heather was deeply in love with Sydney. She told her sister how much they loved each other and how they envisioned a future together. Throughout the affair, Heather was aware that Sydney had a wife. However, Sydney had told her that he was in an open marriage and was no longer in love with Tammy. He even claimed that Tammy had a boyfriend of her own, and they were only living together for financial reasons and for the sake of the kids. Being young and naive, Heather believed every word. Her friends didn't approve of their relationship because Sydney was 17 years older than Heather, and on top of that, he was a married man. He had been married for 15 years to his wife, 40-year-old Tammy. The affair was not a secret at Heather's workplace, and she would often be teased by her colleagues. One of the girls also phoned the restaurant posing as Tammy, looking for Heather. Heather panicked and left work straight away, thinking that Tammy was going to show up. The affair lasted until September 2013, when Heather tweeted, "Once upon a time an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well," referring to her relationship with Sydney. Tammy found out about the affair, though it's unclear how she discovered it. People close to Heather said that once Tammy became aware of the affair, it was chaotic. Soon after discovering her husband's affair with the young waitress, Tammy called Heather and demanded that she end the relationship. Tammy then put Sydney on the phone, and he proceeded to tell Heather that she meant nothing to him, that it was over, and that she was just someone who spread their legs, among other insults that greatly undermined Heather's confidence and self-worth. Over the next few weeks, she tried to focus on rebuilding herself and directing her sights on her goals and work. Tammy, however, was only just getting started. Tammy forced Sydney to get her name tattooed above his crotch. She would also handcuff him to the bed at night so that he could not sneak out. Over the next few weeks, Tammy continued to send nasty texts to Heather, and she even once called Heather 40 times in a single day. Heather believed that taunting Tammy was the best way to deal with the situation, saying things like, "Why are you texting me? You should be worried about your husband." Tammy would take it a step further and send Heather pictures of both Tammy and Sydney in bed together, getting intimate. It was also reported that Sydney texted Heather again, saying that Tammy wasn't entitled to feel the way she did about the affair and act the way she did because she too had a lover, but this turned out to be a lie. They both agreed to call it quits because nothing good was coming from it. Heather, on the other hand, told Sydney that she wanted Tammy to stop calling the restaurant because she lost hours of work and was sent home because Tammy kept calling. Heather and Sydney last saw each other on November 5th after they agreed to end their relationship. Heartbroken, but remaining determined to move on from the situation, Heather continued to work on herself, with those close to her commenting on how she had got her smile back. Things also started to look up for Heather when she was offered a job in a beauty salon, and she was one step closer to her dream job. As for the texts and calls from Tammy, Heather began to get used to them and continued to ignore them, thinking that Tammy would eventually get bored and move on. On November 19th, Sydney and Tammy decided to buy a brand new black Ford F-150 and drive to California with their children to visit Disneyland as a way to rekindle their romance, whereby the trip lasted 3 weeks. Meanwhile, despite Heather's life taking a turn for the better, it would not be long before those around her began to notice that she was gaining weight. So much so that she had to be given a new uniform at work, as her usual one no longer fit. Heather went from having a size A cup size on her bra to a size C cup, and she also went from a medium-sized skirt to a large. These are all changes that are typically associated with someone being pregnant. Finally, Heather took a test at work one day, and it came back invalid. It is not known for certain whether or not Heather was pregnant, but it was considered a very strong possibility given the changes in her physical appearance and the fact that she was known to be having a very intimate relationship with Sydney Moore. Her confidence was coming back, and she organized a date with a guy who was closer to her age that she'd been talking to for quite a while. Things were looking good for Heather. On December 17, 2013, Heather went out on a date with Stephen Chaldy. They didn't have a specific plan, but wanted to spend some time getting to know each other better. They went out to eat, and then drove around looking at Christmas lights, which Heather loved doing during the holidays. Stephen then took Heather to Inlet Mall and taught her how to drive his stick-shift truck. He even took a picture of her trying to drive his car. Heather sent this picture to her best friend, Brianna, and her dad, Terry, who she lived with. The date started at 10 p.m. and ended around 1 a.m. when Stephen dropped Heather off at her apartment. They made plans to meet again the next day for a second date. Regrettably, this marked the last time Heather Elvis was seen. Shortly after returning to her apartment, she received an unexpected call from Sydney Moore, with whom she hadn't been in touch for weeks. During the 4-minute conversation from a payphone, Sydney apologized to Heather, professed his love for her, and revealed that he had left Tammy to be with her. At 1:44 a.m., Heather called her roommate, Brianna, who was away visiting relatives, in a distressed state. She informed Brianna about Sydney's confession of love. Sydney initially denied this call until evidence from CCTV footage proved otherwise. Brianna advised Heather to carefully consider the situation and not jeopardize the progress she had made. Heather mentioned she would reflect on it, do some online research, and then try to sleep, although she found it difficult to rest that night. At 2:29 a.m., Heather attempted to contact the number Sydney had called multiple times before, but no one answered. At 3:16 a.m., Heather tried calling Sydney's cell phone, once again with no response. Heather persisted and dialed Sydney's cell phone again, managing to connect this time. The conversation lasted just over 4 minutes, though its content remains unknown. Following the call, Heather drove to Peachtree Boat Landing, a location merely 3 miles away from Sydney and Tammy's residence. Sydney initially denied this call, only admitting to it when presented with Heather's phone records by the police. He claimed to have spoken to her, directing her to cease contacting him. Heather reached Peachtree Boat Landing at 3:38 a.m. and attempted to contact Sydney several times, but received no response. 2 CCTV cameras recorded a vehicle resembling Sydney and Tammy's, moving from their residence towards Peachtree Boat Landing the next evening. Heather's green Dodge Intrepid was discovered parked at Peachtree Landing on the Waccamaw River by a local officer. The authorities questioned Heather's father, Terry, as the vehicle was registered under his name. Upon inspecting the car, they noticed that Heather's keys, ID, purse, and phone were missing. Terry was permitted to take the car back home. Despite Terry's repeated attempts to reach Heather, his calls went unanswered. When the police visited Heather's apartment, she was not present, and she did not report to work. The search for the missing Heather Elvis had commenced. Sydney and Tammy were suspected of involvement in Heather's case based on texts, phone calls, and public statements. They were arrested on February 21, 2014, for kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and indecent exposure. After spending 11 months in prison, they were released in 2015 on a $100,000 bond each. The murder charges were dismissed in March 2016, and the kidnapping charges were pending. The indecent exposure charges were dropped on June 20, 2016. Sydney's trial for the kidnapping of Heather Elvis began. It was revealed in court that Heather may have been pregnant. Detectives found out that Sydney bought a pregnancy test and cigars at Walmart. Later, Sydney called Heather from a payphone and arranged to meet her. Sydney claimed the pregnancy test was for Tammy, as they were trying for a baby. However, security footage showed them cleaning their car, burning rags, and having a receipt for a pregnancy test. The kidnapping charge against Sydney ended in a mistrial because the jury couldn't agree on a verdict. There was no evidence linking Sydney to Heather's murder. In August 2017, Sydney faced trial once more, this time for obstructing justice. He was convicted and given a 10-year prison sentence. Additionally, the prosecution intended to retry Sydney for kidnapping at a later date. In October 2018, Tammy was put on trial for kidnapping and conspiracy, 5 years after Heather's disappearance. It was revealed during the trial that Tammy was angry about her husband's affair with Heather, especially when rumors suggested that Heather might have been pregnant in December 2013. A family friend, Donald DeMarino, testified that he saw an image of Heather on Tammy's phone at a family gathering after Heather disappeared. According to Donald, Heather in the image did not seem able to move or speak, causing him distress and leading him to leave the event. Although the image was not shown in court and few details were provided, the prosecution's evidence, including this testimony, convinced the jury to find Tammy guilty in less than 2 hours. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison for both charges, with the possibility of parole after a set period. To this day, they have not revealed what occurred to Heather Elvis on that night in December 2013. Both have been attempting to challenge their convictions for years, claiming their innocence, but without success. Currently, Sydney, aged 47, is imprisoned at the high-security Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville, with an expected release date of March 31, 2044. Tammy, aged 50, is at the medium-security Leth Correctional Institution in Greenwood, with an anticipated release date of May 9, 2043. Heather Elvis has never been found, and a tribute garden has been set up at Peachtree Boat Landing in dedication to her. Heather's disappearance left a void in the lives of her family and friends, and their pain, unanswered questions, and desire for closure became part of the story of Myrtle Beach. The community came together in search efforts and vigils, united by hope for answers. Heather's story touched hearts beyond the coastal town, highlighting the challenges of love and relationships. As we honor Heather Elise Elvis, let her memory remind us of life's fragility and the need for compassion and understanding. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Hawks couple. Thomas and Jackie Hawks set out on a journey that would lead them straight into the grasp of tragedy. Unaware, they made the decision to sell their prized possession, their luxurious yacht, which would plunge them into a dark abyss. Imagine the sun glistening on the calm waters, a final voyage on their treasured vessel, and a potential buyer about to finalize the deal. As the sails billowed in the wind and the waves murmured their secrets, the Hawks ventured into the unknown, oblivious that this very journey would become their eternal shroud. Thomas Hawks and his brother Jim Hawks grew up on a farm in the heart of California. They shared a passion for surfing the rolling waves and navigating the vast open sea. However, life's twists and turns saw Thomas answering the call of duty, trading the embrace of the ocean and joining the military. He even ventured into the harsh battlegrounds of the Vietnam War, leaving his mark as a veteran. Despite this, his resilience never wavered, and he transitioned into the realm of justice, becoming a dedicated probation officer. Meanwhile, Jim's path led him into the uniform of a police officer, eventually rising to the esteemed position of police chief. Service and duty ran deep in their veins. Thomas was a dedicated bodybuilder. He had sculpted his body, a testament to his unwavering commitment to physical strength. His impressive physique was a symbol of his indomitable will. Life took its course, and Thomas married, bringing 2 sons, Ryan and Matthew, into the world. However, like the changing tides, the journey of their relationship faced unexpected turns, and they ultimately ended up divorcing. Thomas found himself in Prescott, Arizona, starting a new chapter in his life. His sons followed, drawn to their father in this new land. Then, in an unexpected but positive twist of fate, Thomas crossed paths with Jackie. They fell in love, and their hearts entwined, sparking a love that burned brighter than the Arizona sun. However, Jackie carried scars not of the heart, but of life's cruelty, as a past accident had left her unable to bear children of her own. Yet, her love knew no bounds, as she embraced Thomas's sons as her own flesh and blood. This couple had always faced life's demands, with unwavering determination. They toiled ceaselessly, their dreams woven into their hearts. Their aspiration to own a vessel, a testament to their hard-earned rewards, became a reality as they bought themselves a 55-foot yacht. They named it Well-Deserved, a name their loved ones deemed as a fitting and well-deserved reward for their unyielding work ethic. They took the vessel to the next level by equipping it with the most advanced technology. With retirement's golden years ahead, Thomas and Jackie set sail along the picturesque West Coast. Mexico's exotic shores, California's rugged coastline, and Catalina Island's enchanting beauty became their playground for the following 2 years. They were without a doubt living the dream they had so ardently envisioned. Life being an ever-evolving story, new chapters beckoned. One of Thomas's sons began a family of his own, with the promise of a grandchild on the horizon. Anticipation filled their hearts, the prospect of becoming grandparents, a beacon of joy. Thomas and Jackie then considered the idea of returning to Arizona to be close to their expanding family, and so they made the difficult decision to part with their beloved boat. They decided to sell it in Newport Beach, California, little knowing that this decision would thrust them into the maze of fate, leading to a tragedy they could never have anticipated. The dreams they had so faithfully pursued would take an unexpected and heart-rending turn. In November 2004, they listed their well-deserved yacht for sale at $435,000 through an advertisement in a magazine, choosing to bypass the conventional broker route to save on hefty commissions. With the high price tag for their beloved yacht, which was valued near $500,000, they were confident that the vessel's well-maintained condition would attract eager buyers. But fate had other plans. The first person who responded to their advertisement was not who they had expected. The mysterious individual who reached out was named Skylar Dillion, and what happened next exceeded their expectations. Initially, they were doubtful when they met Dillion. Thomas, a former probation officer, couldn't help but wonder how someone so young had acquired so much wealth. Skylar's explanation, which included a previous career as a child actor, being part of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers cast, and appearing in commercials, had made him rich. Skylar Dillion made a great offer, a full cash offer, sweetened with an additional $15,000 for some personal items he wants to keep on the boat. To further reduce the Hawks' hesitation, he arrived at the meeting with his pregnant wife, Jennifer Henderson, and their young child. Their seemingly happy family had an effect, slowly melting away the Hawks' worries as trust gradually grew. However, under their friendly exterior, Skylar and Jennifer were hiding a treacherous deceit that would lead to serious consequences. The Hawks were unaware of this, as they had developed a strong trust in Dillion. The sea trial, a normal part of boat sales, was set for November 15, 2004, and turned out to be a significant day. Shortly before the trial, on November 12, 2004, the Hawks went on a meaningful trip to Santa Catalina Island near the Los Angeles coast. It was a bittersweet occasion, celebrating the upcoming sale of their beloved boat, and one final sale on it. Friends and family were told that a buyer had been found, and the sale was close. On November 15th, as the morning sun illuminated the scene, Skylar and his wife arrived with two men, one slender and the other muscular. The Hawks were surprised by the presence of these two individuals, sparking suspicions. However, Dillion quickly eased their concerns by stating that they were merely acquaintances. He clarified that the well-built man was his accountant. After these explanations, Jennifer and the child stayed behind, while the others boarded the boat and set off on their journey. They slowly navigated into the vast open waters, leaving their familiar world behind. Little did they know, this voyage would be their last. mysteriously marking the final time anyone would see them. As the sun set and darkness descended, Carter Ford, the port captain of the Lido Isle Yacht Club and a close friend of the Hawks, looked forward to their evening meeting with anticipation. Plans were in place and excitement filled the air. However, when night fell over Newport Harbor like a heavy blanket, an unsettling message disrupted the peace. Jackie called with troubling news that made Ford shiver. The Hawks were on a sea trial, which seemed routine, but something felt off. The buyer and his group had kept them out on the water longer than expected, leading to uncertainty. The Hawks promised to contact once they returned, and this was the last anyone heard from them. When the sun rose again, the yacht had returned to Newport Beach, but the couple was nowhere to be found. A puzzling mystery unfolded, as they seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Days passed with no word to their loved ones, their phones silent. To add to the mystery, Jackie's SUV was also missing, leading some to wonder if they had gone on a sudden road trip to enjoy their recent financial success, choosing to disconnect from the world as they celebrated. But the dark reality became clear. The Hawks were not on vacation. Something more sinister had happened to them, and it was only later that they realized this. A week passed, and the unusual silence from the Hawks sparked many questions and concerns. Their loved ones felt the weight of their absence, with a fear that something was wrong. The family turned to Carter Ford in desperation, asking him to go out to the well and investigate. As Ford boarded the boat, he felt a deep sense of concern. Everything seemed to be in disarray, with a lone white towel hanging ominously from one of the portholes. The family was disturbed by the strange scene and immediately took action by filing a missing persons report. Detectives were called to the scene. They proceeded cautiously, breaking the lock on the cabin door and entering. Inside the boat, there were no signs of violence, but a sinister presence seemed to be lurking in the shadows. Their attention was drawn to a white towel stained with fresh ink, hidden between the bed and the wall. It made them stop and think, prompting disturbing questions. A receipt nearby revealed a troubling list of items: bleach, cleaning supplies, heavy-duty trash bags, and Tums, an antacid. The detectives began to connect the pieces of this dark puzzle. The cleaning supplies seemed well suited for a murder, with the trash bags to dispose of evidence, bleach to clean away any traces, and Tums possibly used to calm a stomach unsettled by the horrific acts. The boat had secrets that scared everyone who entered. Investigators were determined to find out the truth about the yacht's buyers, Skylar and Jennifer. A surveillance team was quickly put together to follow them closely. Undercover officers followed the Dillians, observing them living their daily lives, seemingly unaffected by suspicion. They were regular volunteers at a local church, and Jennifer's work as a hairdresser presented no unusual facets. To the world, they appeared utterly ordinary, masking their true nature with chilling adeptness. As detectives delved deeper into their backgrounds, a grim portrait emerged. Skylar Dillian's history bore the stain of a prior conviction for burglary, landing him on probation. Financial scrutiny revealed that the couple was drowning in a staggering $87,000 worth of debt, a dire financial abyss. The investigators were puzzled by a question: how did the couple manage to buy a yacht when they were struggling financially? After looking into Skylar's claims of fame on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they found out he was just an uncredited extra in a few episodes. To add to the mystery, the couple was living in Jennifer's parents' garage. Their desire to own a yacht didn't match their financial situation, leaving the detectives confused. The more they investigated, the more confusing the situation became. Dillian was being questioned intensely, but he stuck to his story that he had bought the yacht legally. Surprisingly, he admitted that the money came from selling drugs. Things got even more intense when he revealed that he had handed over a briefcase full of cleaned money from Mexico, mostly in $100 bills, to Tom. Interestingly, Skylar said that the Hawks had asked him to help with setting up a bank account in Mexico, so they could start a new life there. He also mentioned that Tom and Jackie had given him power of attorney, allowing him to control their money and transfer it to Mexico. To strengthen his story, Schuyler showed what seemed to be a real power of attorney document with signatures that looked real. Despite denying any role in their disappearance and suggesting the couple may have gone to Mexico, doubts remained. Cell phone records showed the Hawks' phones were near the Mexican border the day after the sea trial with Schuyler. Frustrated detectives went back to square one and refocused on the Hawks family, prioritizing the safety of the couple above all else. They sought answers by going to the national news, where a family member appeared on camera asking for help in finding the missing couple and their car. The mystery only grew deeper, capturing the world's attention with its twists and turns. An American citizen in Mexico called in, sparking action in the investigation. He had seen the car they were looking for on the news, and it was right in front of him. Authorities went to a house near Ensenada in Mexico and found the Hawks' car. Despite the Hawks being missing for over a month and the fear of something bad happening, there was hope that this could be them. There was a glimmer of optimism. Maybe this was the breakthrough they needed. A Mexican federal agent knocked on the door, leading the way. The names Schuyler Dillion and Jennifer came up in the Spanish conversation. The man at the door had a chilling connection. He was an old surfing buddy of Schuyler. He casually mentioned that Schuyler had given him the car, and then Jennifer, his pregnant wife, had driven him back to the US. The detectives quickly collected samples from inside the car and found Schuyler's DNA on a heater knob, a significant piece of evidence. This discovery led to suspicions of foul play. The investigators believed that Schuyler and Jennifer may have vital information or knowledge of the events, but concrete proof was still needed. A new development occurred when the detectives looked into a suspicious power of attorney. Theory that Tom and Jackie allowed strangers access to their accounts raised concerns. However, the notary, Kathleen Harris, supported Schuyler's story, claiming she had witnessed the Hawks signing the papers and confirming their identities with fingerprints. While this aligned with Schuyler's account, the detectives decided to investigate further. They asked Harris to describe Tom and Jackie Hawks. While she accurately described Tom, her portrayal of Jackie raised suspicion. She described Jackie as having brown curly hair, when in reality, she had chopped her long curly locks and had a spiked blonde hairstyle. Was this confusion or a sinister cover-up? The power of attorney had fingerprints that matched perfectly and seemed to have legitimate signatures. Despite this, there was still a sense of worry. The case was given to the FBI to ease doubts, and the world's best handwriting analysts were brought in. Their discoveries were surprising. Tom's signature was genuine, as was Jackie's. However, there was an oddity in Jackie's signature that left investigators puzzled and struggling to solve the mystery. Armed with the unsettling revelation, the investigators received a tip that Schuyler was going to flee. He had asked his probation officer for permission to leave the country, which helped the quick-thinking detectives quickly catch him for money laundering, the crime he had confessed to earlier. Investigators arrived at the garage apartment where Jennifer's parents resided and found a collection of personal items belonging to Tom and Jackie, such as their camera and driver's licenses. Upon inspecting Jackie's driver's license photo, they were surprised to see a striking resemblance to the notary's description, raising further suspicions about her involvement and the legitimacy of her actions. The investigation took a darker turn, shedding light on the unsettling idea that more people may be involved in this mysterious disappearance than previously thought. As the lies began to unravel, it exposed an intricate web of mysteries and secrets waiting to be revealed. In the garage, investigators found a business card belonging to an LAPD detective who worked with Interpol. They contacted the Interpol agent to discuss their investigation into Schuyler's possible involvement in the Hawks' disappearance. The Interpol agent then shared that he had encountered Schuyler a year earlier during a murder investigation in Mexico involving an American citizen. This connection raised the possibility that Schuyler might have been involved in both cases. The main challenge was to find evidence. Detectives found something strange on the yacht. In photos, it had 2 anchors, but in reality, only 1. Their suspicions grew as they realized the discrepancy. A chilling theory started to form. Detectives linked anchor absence on yacht to couple's disappearance, due to Schuyler's ruse concealing sinister plot to steal prized possession. Needed undeniable proof. The net was tightening. Jennifer's actions revealed her involvement in the plot. Her effort to drain Hawks's account was evidence of her awareness of the situation, despite not being on the boat. But at a crucial moment, detectives identified a name in the power of attorney papers, a name that would shift the course in solving this puzzling case. The name belonged to a man who had witnessed the significant transaction, a man named Alonso. Alonso, who was only 19 at the time, resided with his parents and worked as a prison guard. A bond had developed between him and Dillian, while the latter was in prison for theft. Schuyler had convinced Alonso to accompany him to the meetings. He was the slim man who had gone with him on the sea trial. Offering leniency in his punishment, they made an agreement with Alonso, pushing him to share his perspective and expose the chilling truth about the Hawks' destiny. As the tape recorder started playing, Alonso began to tell a frightening story. He revealed details about a man named John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was introduced as an accountant by Schuyler. However, Kennedy was not an ordinary man. He was actually a notorious gang member and former convict known as John F. Kennedy. Alonso explained how they had planned a dangerous scheme that would bring disaster to the Hawks. Their evil plan involved kidnapping a couple and taking them out to sea to throw them overboard. The frightening story began when John F. Kennedy pretended to be seasick and went below deck. Thomas, concerned for him, went down to check on him and fell into their trap. Schuyler followed, and together they attacked Thomas. Amidst the chaos, Jackie asked worried questions. Alonso grabbed her, used a taser to immobilize her, handcuffed her, and took her to another part of the boat. Both Thomas and Jackie found themselves helpless, with their eyes and mouths taped shut. In those harrowing moments, as Jackie struggled to scream through her gag with tears of desperation flowing, Thomas offered a small gesture of solace. Handcuffed together, he tenderly stroked her hand with his fingers, a silent attempt to comfort her in the face of the grim fate that awaited them in the merciless hands of their captors. The grim saga continued as they were taken into the kitchen area, where the power of attorney awaited their reluctant signatures. The chilling ultimatum hung in the air like a death knell: cooperate, and perhaps they would be spared, or resist, and death would be their fate. The boat steered into the haunting depths of the ocean near Catalina Island, a place once filled with cherished memories for Tom and Jackie. On the deck of the vessel, they were bound together with a rope, a ghastly prelude to the impending horror. Dillian then disengaged one of the anchors from the boat's bow as he dragged the chain along, the dreadful sound echoing in their ears. They had heard that sound countless times before, but this time, it signaled their inexorable doom. Jackie's pleas for her life were heartbreaking, as she yearned to see her grandchild and believed she was too young to die. Tom assured her they would be together as they faced the cruel reality, being cast overboard into the Pacific Ocean. They were pushed from their vessel, dragged down by the anchor, disappearing into the depths. Unfortunately, their bodies were never found, shrouding their fate in mystery. After completing their evil deed, Schuyler began a cruel mission to eliminate any evidence of the Hawks' presence. He collected their precious belongings, including photographs, and heartlessly threw them into the deep ocean, where their memories faded away, abandoned without any regret. With all traces of the couple gone, Dillian and John F. Kennedy tried to return to a sense of normalcy as they sailed back to Newport Harbor, relaxing and fishing as if the terrifying recent events were just a disturbing illusion. Justice caught up with Schuyler, Dillian, John F. Kennedy, and Alonzo McChain as they faced 2 counts of first-degree murder. Jennifer Henderson defended her husband's innocence while facing her own reckoning, as she too was charged with 2 counts of murder. Her involvement in the gruesome act was revealed, laying bare her complicity. The chilling murders were driven by a strong desire for money. Myron Gardner, an ex-convict and former gang member, played a key role in connecting Dillian with John F. Kennedy, despite not actively participating in the crime. Gardner faced charges of involuntary manslaughter for his part in these events. Justice was served when different juries found them all guilty. Jennifer Henderson was sentenced to 2 life terms in October 2007, without the chance of parole. John Fitzgerald Kennedy received a death sentence on May 1, 2009, and was placed on death row in San Quentin State Prison. Alonzo Machane testified against the others, pleaded guilty, and received a lighter sentence on June 15, 2009, 20 years and 4 months in prison, with the chance of parole in September 2021. In March 2009, Myron Gardner's life changed after spending 4 years in prison. He decided to plead guilty to being an accessory after the crime, which led to the dismissal of the murder charges against him. Meanwhile, Skylar Dillian, also in jail, faced more accusations. He was said to have asked another inmate to carry out a dark plan against his own family members. Things took a darker turn when Dillian was also implicated in the murder of an American citizen named John Jarvie, who was killed in Mexico in 2003. Dillian's cousin and father, who were connected to the Jarvie murder, were considered crucial witnesses in both murder cases. On September 22nd, jury selection began for the trial of Skylar Dillian. Dillian was tried for the murders of Thomas and Jackie Hawkes, as well as John Jarvie. The verdict was given on April 10, 2009, with Dillian receiving a death sentence from Judge Frank Faisal in Orange County Superior Court. He was sent to death row at San Quentin State Prison. Before Skylar Dillian was sent to prison, a troubling discovery was made. While incarcerated on March 13, 2008, he performed a disturbing act by partially cutting his own male private part with a razor blade, as he wished to remove it. After receiving immediate medical attention, he was taken back to his cell the next day. In an interview, Dillian admitted that his reason for this extreme self-injury was a strong desire to transition to a woman. He had already changed his name from John Julius Jacobson to Skylar Dillian, choosing a gender-neutral name to represent his identity. Defense lawyers claimed that Dillian's need for money to pay for sex reassignment surgery was the hidden reason for the murders of the Hawks. However, it is important to understand that this motive does not justify the terrible crimes he committed. In 2019, Dillian's gender was legally changed to female, and she is now known as Skylar Preciosa Dillian. The Hawks family holds dear the lasting memory of Thomas and Jackie, always engraved in their hearts. These lively individuals, recognized for their adventurous nature, embodied goodness and genuineness. Their destiny took a harsh turn, and even though they have passed away, their spirits persist, shining a timeless light on our recollections. May they rest in eternal peace in paradise. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Agustina M. Winkelried. Agustina was born on June 6, 2001 in Esperanza. Agustina lived with her large family and as the youngest of 5 children, received special treatment. People described Agustina as friendly, kind, and always smiling. Like many young people, she enjoyed going to the movies, bowling, discos, and playing the ukulele with her friends. Esperanza is a small town of around 40,000 residents, where everyone tends to know each other. The limited entertainment options led to the town's young people frequently running into and knowing one another. On the afternoon of January 12, 2019, Agustina's father dropped her off at a friend's house, where a group of 6 planned to gather. The girls had arranged to visit a nightclub and bowling center called Teos together. Agustina told her father she would spend the night at a friend's house. After leaving the club, Agustina sent a message to her boyfriend, Nahuel, asking him to join her, but he declined, saying he was tired. At the club, Agostina and her friends were having a blast, dancing and enjoying the music. By 5 a.m., they decided it was time to head out, but Agostina ran into another group of friends and decided to stick around for a bit longer. A surveillance camera captured her leaving the venue at 5:40 a.m., carrying her cell phone. After leaving the club, Agostina stopped by a fast food stand, waited in line, chatted with an acquaintance, and then headed towards the road. Normally, Agostina's parents knew her whereabouts because she always kept them informed. However, when morning arrived and they didn't receive a text from her saying she had made it to her friend's house safely, they grew concerned and tried to reach her. But her phone was unavailable. Her friend told the worried parents that Agostina hadn't returned from the club. Agostina's parents then contacted all her acquaintances, but no one knew where she might be. As a result, Agostina's father called the police and began searching for his daughter on his own. Daniel Rinclevery, a well-known local figure and president of the town's soccer club, was also the owner of a small furniture manufacturing and sales company. When news broke that he was in distress, many townspeople volunteered to help with the search for his missing niece, Agostina. Agostina's friends turned to social media to spread the word about her disappearance, which eventually caught the attention of television news programs. As a result, the police launched an investigation, focusing on Tio's club, the last place Agostina was seen. They interviewed potential witnesses and reviewed surveillance footage, which showed Agostina walking towards the road, but didn't provide any further leads. The police then broadened their search, questioning residents living along the road and staff from nearby businesses. They hoped someone might have seen or heard something, no matter how insignificant, that could serve as a clue to Agostina's whereabouts. Brian, a friend of Agostina's, heard about her disappearance on social media. He saw the many posts about finding her and got in touch with her father, Daniel. Brian told Daniel that he had seen Agostina outside Tio's club at around 6 a.m. He was driving by and noticed her standing on the side of the road, talking to the driver of a silver car that had pulled over next to her. This was a few hundred meters from the club. Brian drove on, but quickly pulled out his phone and called Agostina to check on her. He asked if she was okay and if she needed a ride home. Agostina told him she was fine, and that the man driving the silver car had stopped to warn her that the road wasn't safe to walk on because of the risk of being hit by traffic. She accepted Brian's offer of a ride, saying she was on her way to a friend's house. Brian then turned his car around and headed back towards Tio's club. When he arrived, Agostina was no longer there, and neither was the silver car. Assuming she had gone with the driver, Brian continued to try calling her, but she did not answer. Concerned, he drove to the friend's house she had mentioned, but there was no sign of her. He continued to check his phone for updates, hoping to hear from her or see her posting on social media. After learning about Agostina's disappearance and the discovery of her body, Brian shared crucial information with the police, providing a potential lead on the silver car and its driver. This testimony added vital details to the timeline, helping investigators reconstruct Agostina's final moments. Brian had stopped at a nearby gas station, about a few hundred meters from where he last saw Agostina, to wait for her and fill up his car. When Agostina failed to show up 15 minutes later, Brian went to look for her, but couldn't find her. His attempts to contact her were also unsuccessful, as she didn't answer. At the time, he didn't think much of it, assuming Agostina had gone directly to her friend's house and forgotten about their meeting. The primary clue in the investigation was the silver car. Although Brian couldn't identify the exact brand and model, he recalled it was an older vehicle. The driver might have been the last person to see Agostina, and it was possible that he was linked to her disappearance. When the police attempted to track Agostina's cell phone, they found that the last signal it transmitted was received by a tower located in the same neighborhood as Teo's club. Since the club was situated on the outskirts of town, surrounded by numerous vacant lots and fields, the search teams focused their search efforts in these areas. Of all the organizations along the road Agustina was walking on, only this particular gas station had installed surveillance cameras. Daniel suspected that Agustina might have passed by the gas station, given its proximity to her friend's house, and so he went there to review the footage and see if it had captured his daughter. The gas station attendant, a fellow father, sympathized with Daniel's concern and showed him the recording from that morning, which almost resulted in the attendant losing his job, as it was against the rules to share the footage with unauthorized individuals. The gas station owner was furious when he found out and fired the attendant on the spot. However, when the townspeople heard what had happened, they boycotted the gas station, taking their business elsewhere. This backlash forced the gas station owner to reconsider, and he eventually rehired the attendant, apologizing to him publicly in front of Esperanza. Daniel reviewed the gas station's camera footage, but didn't find his daughter on it. It seemed Agustina never made it there. However, the footage did show the same old silver Renault car Brian had described earlier. It drove past the gas station around the time Agustina was walking along the road. Daniel identified the car's owner as 39-year-old Pablo Trionfini, a municipal garbage collector who lived less than a kilometer away. Although he had no prior criminal record, Trionfini had caught the police's attention before. In 2017, his ex-wife reported him for domestic abuse, which led to a court order prohibiting him from contacting her. He was arrested again that year for violating that order. Not long after Daniel viewed the gas station's security footage, police officers arrived, unaware that Agustina's father had already seen it. They viewed the surveillance video and recognized the silver car. However, when they discovered that Daniel had seen the video before them, they feared a lynching might occur and rushed to Pablo Trionfini's house. Upon arrival, they found a crowd gathered in front of the house, shouting, "Where is Agustina?" The crowd dispersed when the police arrived, and one of the onlookers told the officers that Trionfini was inside. He had peeked out after hearing the shouting but fled back into the house and bolted the door when he saw the hostile crowd. Lacking probable cause for an unauthorized entry, the officers requested a search warrant. While waiting, they cordoned off the house to prevent Trionfini's escape. Around midnight, an officer decided to investigate the yard and found Pablo Trionfini deceased. The police rushed to help, but it was too late. Trionfini's death implicated him in Agustina's disappearance, but a search of his house and car yielded no evidence. By taking his own life, Trionfini had avoided further trouble and consequences. As the police were searching the house, Trionfini's neighbor approached them and said that Pablo had dropped by during the day and asked to borrow a shovel, allegedly to dig for some earthworms because he was going fishing. A half hour later, he returned the shovel and said something that struck the neighbor as very odd. Witnesses saw Trionfini leave the house several times on Sunday, riding his bicycle while holding a shovel. This possibly meant that Agustina was no longer among the living. On Monday, January 14, 2019, a search began at daybreak with the aid of drones and police dogs. At 9:15 a.m., Agustina's half-stripped body was discovered approximately 500 meters away from Teo's club. It had been concealed in a ditch covered with dense vegetation. The forensic examination showed that Agustina had fought desperately for her life. Her hands had defensive wounds, and pieces of her attacker's skin were found under her fingernails. DNA analysis verified that the man who assaulted Agustina was Pablo Trionfini. Forensics ruled the cause of death as strangulation. The exact circumstances of how Agustina ended up in Pablo Trionfini's car remain a mystery. Did he force her in, or did he simply offer her a lift? We will never know for certain, as the only two people who could provide answers are now deceased and unable to speak. A thorough search of Trionfini's phone revealed no evidence to suggest that he had any prior connection to Agustina. Hundreds of mourners attended Agustina Invincariat's funeral to pay their respects, whereas, surprisingly, not even Pablo Trionfini's family members showed up to his own funeral, according to reports by Argentine media outlets. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dupont de Ligonnès. In early April 2011, the shutters of house number 55 on Boulevard Robert Schumann in Nantes, France, remained closed for the first time in years. This was unusual because the house, which belonged to the Dupont de Ligonnès family, was typically filled with the sounds of the family's 4 teenage children and their 2 dogs. The family consisted of Xavier, his wife Agnes, and their children. The neighbors, who were accustomed to seeing the shutters open even when the family was on vacation, noticed the unusual silence and alerted the local police, fearing something might have happened to the family. During the initial police inspections, no signs of the Dupont de Ligonnès family were found. However, on the 5th inspection, a horrific discovery was made. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès was born on March 9, 1961, in Versailles, a western suburb of Paris. He was the eldest son of French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Ligonnès and his wife Geneviève Tertz. The family also had a daughter named Christine, born in 1966. When Bernard deserted his wife for a mistress, Xavier took on a leadership role in his family, caring for his mother and sister. Christine began to claim she received divine messages, which she transcribed during automatic writing sessions, similar to those of a surrealist poet. Her unusual beliefs gradually evolved into doomsday sermons, leading her to establish a cult called the Church of Philadelphia. This group attracted members of the aristocracy, whom Geneviève convinced were chosen to survive the impending apocalypse and participate in the world's rebirth. According to Geneviève, Christine was destined to give birth to the Savior, a child who would be the reincarnation of both Jesus and Satan, and thus bring salvation. Although Xavier inherited his father's noble title, he showed little interest in French traditions, instead being captivated by luxury, high-performance cars, and eccentricities. He also greatly admired the United States. Geneviève financially supported Xavier's extravagant lifestyle through significant donations from cult members, who were sworn to secrecy about their activities. On the beautiful island of Bréhat in 1974, Xavier formed a strong and lasting bond with Emmanuel Teneur. The 2 boys developed a deep, mutual understanding that continued throughout their lives. Although Emmanuel confessed his love for Xavier, which was rejected, their close friendship remained unaffected. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnès Hona, born on November 9, 1962, in Neuilly-sur-Seine, near Paris. Agnès was deeply devoted to her religion and worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Castille Catholic School in Nanterre, where she taught catechism. While little is known about her family, it is well documented that Xavier and Agnès developed a close relationship, which led to a brief but passionate romance before they eventually parted ways. In 1990, Agnès gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a casual relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier rekindled their romance and decided to tie the knot. Xavier adopted Arthur as his own son, and 2 years later, they welcomed their first biological son, Thomas, who would carry on the family name. To mark the occasion, Xavier chose Emmanuel as Thomas's godfather. The couple went on to have 2 more children, Anne and Benoit. The family of 6 seemed to personify the ideal family unit, with Xavier appearing as a loving father and the children excelling academically, hinting at a bright future. Agnès was devoted to nurturing her children's faith, regularly taking them to Mass. Others perceived her as kind yet firm with her children. Around the year 2000, Xavier relocated his family to the United States, aligning with their individual interests and preferences. Xavier, a charismatic and multilingual individual with a discreet nature, was confident in his ability to blend in seamlessly in the United States. However, this endeavor ended in failure, resulting in substantial financial losses. Upon his return to France, he began to amass significant debts tied to his professional pursuits, which often seemed shrouded in ambiguity. Multiple investigations have portrayed him as a salesman. According to French media reports, financial struggles had been a persistent concern for Xavier over several years. One of Xavier's unsuccessful ventures was an unusual scheme to import cars from the United States to France. He also launched several small businesses, none of which saw significant success, including a hotel and restaurant guide for sales representatives, a customer loyalty system for restaurants, and an import scheme for cars from the United States to France. He was listed as the manager of the French Federation of Commerce, although the accounts for this enterprise were minimal. In 2003, he hired 6 salespeople to help turn his fortunes around. Xavier's work often took him away from home from Monday to Friday, earning him a meager annual income of around $4,200 in declared earnings. As financial issues began to strain his marriage, typical marital disagreements were likely exacerbated. In 2004, Agnes poured her heart out on a French forum, detailing the challenges she and her husband faced. She revealed that he had once told her that a group death as a family wouldn't be catastrophic, a haunting statement that would linger. By 2009, the mounting debt had severely impacted their relationship, leading to a temporary separation. During this period, Xavier sent numerous letters blaming Agnes for the family's troubles and holding her responsible for their financial ruin. This emotional turmoil took a devastating toll on Agnes, causing her to lose her appetite and struggle with insomnia on numerous occasions. Xavier sought help from his friend Emmanuel, who hailed from a wealthy family and had inherited a substantial fortune from his father. Despite his affluence, Emmanuel lived modestly in a small apartment, preferring to use his wealth to support others. He was an enigmatic and somewhat eccentric individual who never hesitated to lend Xavier significant sums of money. In addition to financial support, Emmanuel funded Xavier's travels and even co-signed for the house where Xavier eventually settled with his family in the late 2000s. Thanks to Emmanuel's generosity, the family resided in a cozy chalet located in the suburbs at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann, west of N. As they settled in, the neighbors quickly formed the impression that Agnes was domineering and less pleasant than her husband. Behind closed doors, Agnes faced a personal crisis. She saw Xavier as both too fragile and paradoxically too rigid, almost militaristic in his behavior. While he played the role of head of the household, he was emotionally distant, lacking tenderness and affection, and sometimes even abusive. Agnes confided in her Thursday prayer group friends about her fears regarding Genevieve's control over Xavier. She painted her mother-in-law as a mentally unstable mystic, and her concerns ran deep. On January 20th, 2011, Bernard passed away, marking a significant turning point. Given the contrast between his lavish lifestyle and financial struggles, Xavier hoped his father's demise would yield a substantial inheritance. However, he was in for a rude awakening upon reviewing his father's estate, only to find a few papers, a rifle, a card, a ring, and some cash, which he promptly claimed. Within hours of Bernard's passing, Xavier used his father's card to withdraw cash. By February 2nd, he had obtained a firearms license, and by March 12th, he had purchased a silencer for the rifle. During this period, he also acquired quicklime and honed his shooting skills in his garden, targeting a balloon on a stand. When Emmanuel visited, he tried the rifle, unaware of any suspicious intent. Xavier downplayed the silencer, citing concerns about disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, the two friends, Bernard and Xavier, visited a shooting range, where Bernard's inherited rifle drew considerable attention. The following day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times, and they engaged in a nearly hour-long conversation. The investigation suggests that the horror unfolded on Sunday, April 3rd. That evening, Xavier, Agnes, and their children went to the movies, followed by a pleasant dinner at a restaurant. Everyone was present, except for Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic university and resided in a nearby student hostel. After their night out, the family returned to their chalet, where neighbors caught a glimpse of them, and some family members exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. Xavier sent a message to Christine, detailing their dinner outing. The prevailing theory is that Xavier drugged his wife and children, waiting for them to fall asleep before shooting and burying them in the garden. He also killed the family's 2 Labrador dogs. Xavier's alibi was as dubious as his actions. On Monday morning, he began contacting people in his family's social circle from as early as 6 a.m. He phoned Agnes's workplace, claiming she was unwell, and contacted the children's schools, stating that Arthur, Agnes's son from a previous relationship, had been in a motorcycle accident and that Anne and Benoit were ill. By midday, he sent a letter to the restaurant where Arthur worked, announcing Arthur's resignation due to his father's alleged transfer to Australia. There was still Thomas to account for. On the same Monday, April 4th, Xavier met up with Thomas, having dinner with him at a restaurant near his university residence. After the meal, a tired Thomas returned to his room. Thomas received an urgent message from his father the following day, claiming Agnes was in a hospital after a bicycle accident and was in a mild coma. This prompted Thomas to travel immediately. However, it is presumed that Xavier had already killed Thomas, just like he did with his siblings and mother. Later that evening, Emmanuel had a 19-minute conversation with Xavier. At midnight, a friend of Thomas received a message from him, stating he was watching a movie with his father at home. But by then, Thomas was likely already dead. About an hour later, Xavier sent an email to Emmanuel, arranging to meet soon. Emmanuel replied, reminding Xavier that he had power of attorney and that the key was on the sailboat. Instead of trying to hide, Xavier went about his daily routine, going in and out of his house, leaving notes on the door, and withdrawing cash from ATMs. He used his credit cards to pay for meals at restaurants and stayed in hotels under his real name, all while being caught on security cameras. As time passed, neighbors began to notice something was off. The usually open windows of the chalet were closed. The family's 4 children were no longer seen. The dogs had stopped barking, and Agnes hadn't returned to work. It was as if the family had vanished into thin air. Piecing together the strange signs, worried neighbors alerted the authorities. When officers arrived, they found a nearly bare refrigerator containing only a few jars of preserves. In the kitchen, they discovered a still damp mop, and in the living room, a chest sat on the table and guitars lay on the sofa. It seemed as though the Dupont de Leon family had vanished into thin air. The scene was unsettling, with beds stripped of their sheets, picture frames empty, and closets devoid of clothes. Everything hinted at a sudden and mysterious departure. A few days later, on April 9th, a letter emerged, sent to family and friends. The letter claimed that Xavier had been recruited by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had to go into hiding as part of a witness protection program, explaining their sudden disappearance and silence. However, neighbors were skeptical about this story, feeling that something wasn't quite right. They feared for the family's safety and urged the authorities to dig deeper. Xavier drove through southern France in his car as the case continued to attract media attention, leading to the emergence of more details from the past. On April 15th, security cameras recorded Xavier checking into a small hotel near Cannes, where he parked his car, grabbed a bag, and vanished into the nearby woods, marking the last time he was seen. Emmanuel made a surprising call to his mom, revealing secrets like his homosexuality, alcoholism, and depression. When cops searched the house again, they found a freshly disturbed patch of earth. After investigating, they discovered a concrete slab, leading to a grim find. Agnes and her 4 kids, shot and wrapped in bags with religious symbols, buried in burlap sacks with quicklime, along with the family dogs. In the master bedroom, a sleep apnea device was found, last recording at 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Xavier may have spared Thomas due to his bond with Emmanuel. However, when questioned, Emmanuel's cooperative facade cracked, revealing inconsistencies in his story. 24 hours later, Nantes police searched Emmanuel's apartment, seizing his laptop. He then revealed his knowledge of Xavier's rifle. An examination of the hard drive uncovered emails between Emmanuel and Xavier, including one from April 6th that raised suspicions. Investigators began to suspect Emmanuel's involvement in Xavier's escape. Christine and JVV also faced scrutiny for their evasive answers about Xavier and the Church of Philadelphia. JVV dodged questions about Xavier's childhood and the sect's income, denying its existence. But investigators found a complaint from former members who fled after Christine's proposal to conceive a chosen one through group sex. This revealed the sect's workings, including rich backers. Suspecting support for Xavier, police questioned former members and watched the sect's followers, but found no leads. Authorities tracked Xavier's movements via cell phone records. Last sighting, April 15th, possibly carrying a weapon. Despite searches, no body remains found. Speculation, rescued by boat, taken to another country. International arrest warrant issued May 4th. Police investigated boat ownership but found nothing. On May 9th, Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for another interview, which had escalated into a grueling interrogation. The police had shifted their focus to finding a sailboat and identifying its captain, but Emmanuel was still oblivious to the magnitude of the investigation or the mounting suspicions against him. When questioned about a sailboat reference, he attributed it to coincidence, explaining that he had granted Xavier power of attorney to access his safe deposit box in case of an emergency. The key, he revealed, was hidden on a model sailboat in an apartment, and the safe contained only his will. The police, still frustrated and empty-handed despite the intriguing coincidences, ultimately released Emmanuel. At this point, the investigation remained shrouded in uncertainty. Emmanuel was viewed as a witness, with no arrests made, and police questioned the need to further interrogate him. However, they decided to apply pressure, given his credibility as an accomplice. A notable detail emerged when investigators found an unusual $4,200 check signed by Emmanuel, linked to a previously unknown Monaco account. Authorities requested account statements, but faced resistance due to Monaco's strict banking privacy laws. September 28th, 4 police officers visited Emmanuel's home. He emerged disoriented, in underwear, barely confirming his identity. His sparse apartment was cluttered with empty bottles, revealing deep loneliness. Emmanuel was tormented by the lack of letters or calls from his friend. The police now viewed him as a lost soul, not a suspect, wondering if they'd followed the wrong lead. Xavier had become one of France's most wanted alleged murderers, possibly even globally renowned. In 2015, a journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier, stating he was alive, but the handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses failed to yield any conclusive evidence. On January 9, 2018, police raided a monastery in Rab-Brun-sur-Aron following a tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier, but after an intense 2-hour search, they determined it was a case of mistaken identity. On January 18, 2019, Andual died of a heart attack, and that same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland, but once again, it proved to be a case of mistaken identity. Another theory proposes that Xavier might be hiding in South America, specifically Argentina, where his linguistic skills and charisma would enable him to seamlessly blend in. Years have passed, and the Church of Philadelphia has not only endured, but reportedly undergone a resurgence. This small, highly secretive group consists of members who have been part of it for nearly 40 years, living as if they have withdrawn from the world. In the summer of 2019, 2 brothers who were raised within the sect filed new complaints against Christine and Gev, claiming that these women fervently preached that Xavier was alive, innocent, and hiding in the United States as part of a witness protection program. They alleged that everything written in the April 9th letter was pure fabrication. Since 2011, the case has been plagued by speculation and false leads, leading authorities down endless dead ends. The pressing question remains, will justice ever be served for Agnes and her children? Despite the bleak outlook, some still believe that the truth will eventually come to light. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The chilling case of Grace Mullane. Grace Emmy Rose Mullane was born on December 2, 1996, in Wickford, Essex, to her parents Gillian and David Mullane. She was the youngest of her three siblings and was known to be a lovely, outgoing, fun-loving, and family-oriented daughter who loved creativity and the arts. Given the family's close bond, Grace maintained daily contact with her siblings and parents, even while she had been away at the University of Lincoln, where she studied advertising and marketing. In 2018, 21-year-old Grace Mullane finally graduated with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing. Like most young people around that age, Grace decided that she would celebrate the end of her university education with a gap year before she settled down into a steady career. She decided to take a year out to travel South America before heading to New Zealand to tour there. She set out for a 10-month solo adventure in October 2018, initially visiting Peru before setting off for South America on November 19th. Grace arrived in New Zealand and checked into the base backpackers hostel in Auckland, ready for a 2-week stay traveling around the Upper North Island. It was in New Zealand that Grace met up with her Tinder match, a 28-year-old man named Jesse Kempson, on December 1st, 2018. Jesse Kempson was born on December 28, 1991, in Lower Hutt, New Zealand, but he grew up in Wellington. His parents separated when he was young, and for a time, he was raised by his grandparents. He moved to Australia with his mother as a teenager, but by 2016, he had returned to New Zealand and was living in a boarding house in Wellington. Little did Grace know that Jesse had a more sinister side to him. Jesse was known to be a very charming lad, and he used that to his advantage to manipulate people. He couldn't hold a job or accommodation because of his compulsive lies. On one occasion, Jesse lied to his former landlord that he was a professional softball player, freshly signed up by New Zealand's national softball team, the Black Sox, and claimed that his contract money was coming so that he could pay for rent. This went on for 2 months, only for the landlord to find out from the Black Sox management that nobody knew who he was. Unfortunately, the landlord found out also that he fled to another place without his knowledge, leaving him more than $1,700 out of pocket. At times, he had also claimed to have a bachelor's degree in international law, come from a family of millionaires who were looking to buy a top Oakland restaurant, and have contacts within Immigration New Zealand, and many other lies he mentioned to people. In reality, Jesse was nothing more than a fantasist who could only impress people with exaggerated stories. His former roommates in a boarding house in Green Lane found him unsettling and untrustworthy before he eventually moved into City Life apartments. On another occasion, a woman he lived with claimed he stole money from her home and fled, leaving his City Life landlord thousands of dollars short after Jesse lied that he got paid monthly and still failed to make rent payments. Jesse remained an enigma to many, fabricating his way through life and seemingly evading consequences repeatedly. Back in the hostel where Grace was staying, she was happily conversing with Jesse. The unsuspecting 21-year-old Grace was charmed by Jesse, even sending a text to her close friend Anna back home, telling her that she clicked with the guy. As it was a Saturday and her 22nd birthday was the next day, Grace didn't want to spend it alone and decided to go out to celebrate. She decided to meet up with Jesse Kempson, as he lived 5 minutes down the road from where Grace was staying, and they needed to get to know each other better. On the day the Tinder matches were supposed to meet, Grace got ready for her big night out and felt nothing but excitement and optimism for the evening ahead. Grace left the base backpackers hostel in Auckland at 6 p.m. and went into the city center streets, dressed in a black dress and carrying a small handbag, unaware of the tragic turn of events that was about to unfold. The evening appeared to be going well, and the two visited a room with blue-colored walls before leaving together around 9:30 p.m. The next day was Grace's 22nd birthday, but she was not responding to the birthday wishes from her family and friends. This silence caused concern and panic, especially among her family members. It was unusual for Grace, as she would regularly update her family about her trip, bombarding them with details and pictures of her adventures. Grace's parents contacted the Auckland police and reported her as missing on December 5th. The detectives did not initially suspect any foul play, as they learned that Grace had not returned to the hostel on the night of December 1st, and thought that perhaps she was staying with some new friends. It did not take long to trace Grace's whereabouts on the night she disappeared, due to the extensive network of CCTV cameras around the city, and the mysterious man she was seen with that night was identified as Jesse Kempson. On the night Jesse was going to meet Grace, he dropped by a local bar, the Bluestone Room, right next to the City Life Hotel where he was living. Jesse was observed consuming 4 bottles of beer half an hour before their scheduled meeting with Grace, appearing solitary in a drinking establishment away from the main commercial area of Milan. Meanwhile, Grace was already at the base of the Sky Tower, the location they had agreed to meet, demonstrating her eagerness to potentially commence a holiday romance. The Sky Tower is very well known in New Zealand's biggest city and is one of the most obvious icons on the city's skyline, visible for miles around, and the focus of many events. Most importantly, it is highly public, and the sort of location where Grace would have felt safer to meet someone. As Jesse arrived, the pair recognized each other almost immediately, and he hugged her as she smiled and moved towards him. Their first stop was a burger restaurant and bar on the first floor of the adjacent Sky City complex. Their entire time together at Sky City was caught on camera, and the footage showed them chatting as they went up on an escalator to Andy's Burger and Bar, where they ordered cocktails from a barman and moved on to a table to talk. An hour and a half later, they left the bar and headed back outside and onto a restaurant less than a block away, the Mexican Cafe. After consuming 2 jugs of margarita and 1 of sangria, they left the cafe and headed to the Bluestone Room, where he had been drinking alone earlier. At 8:40 p.m., Jesse put his hand behind Grace's head and pulled it towards his, kissing her for a second or so. Over the next hour, they kissed several times more, only stopping briefly while Kempson walked out of shot, and Grace checked her phone, as it turned out, sending her final message to her friend Anna. Then, Grace also walked out of the shot. Jesse had gone onto his phone to post a message on her Facebook profile picture, saying she was beautiful and very radiant, an act that led the detectives right to him. Soon after 9:30 p.m., the footage showed them leaving and heading to the lobby of the City Life Hotel, where they entered the lift. Jesse searched for his keycard as they made their way towards room 308. What happened in room 308 after the couple arrived is unknown, apart from the fact that Jesse murdered Grace. By 1:30 a.m., Grace was found dead inside the room. It is clear that Grace never left the building, and Jesse did not call emergency services or even ask for help when she died. After Grace's death, Jesse carried out several internet searches, which indicated not only how unconcerned he was about her death, but how he was actively planning to conceal it. Using his mobile phone, he searched for information on the most intense fires and the ranges of water care. He also searched for the location where he would later try to bury Grace in a shallow grave. The perpetrator then browsed a website to watch videos. Jesse also took 7 intimate photographs of Grace's dead body, including close-ups, manipulating her body to get the shots he wanted. The following morning, with Grace still lying dead in room 308, he texted another woman he had met on Tinder, trying to arrange a date for later that day. Shortly after, he was again captured on CCTV footage, moving from his room to a leisure store to purchase a suitcase, and then to a supermarket to acquire some cleaning supplies. He then rented a red Toyota hatchback vehicle, and as Grace lay deceased in his hotel room, He departed in the afternoon to meet up with the woman he had been exchanging text messages with earlier in the day at a bar named Rory, located in the fashionable Ponsonby suburb. Soon after meeting him at the Rory bar, he told her that all his friends were police officers and that his closest friend was coming to New Zealand to be a Crown prosecutor. When they discussed a murder trial she had once attended, he told her it was crazy how people can make one wrong move and go to jail for the rest of their lives. He then went on to say that he had heard about a guy who asked his girlfriend to have rough sex, but it had gone wrong and she had died in the process, which made the woman uncomfortable. Jesse continued with his lies for the rest of the conversation, and she became increasingly uneasy. When she left the bar, despite her anxiety, Jesse later texted her asking for another date, which she turned down. After he returned to his room around 5:45 p.m. on December 2nd, he hired a rug doctor machine to thoroughly clean the carpet, telling the shopkeeper he needed it to remove a red wine stain. Later, he parked his rental car outside the hotel, retrieved a trolley from the reception, went upstairs, and came back with the trolley, which was now carrying 2 large suitcases, one of which matched the one he had purchased earlier. He loaded the cases into the car and moved it to a nearby car park. The silver suitcase contained Grace's body, while the second case was used as a cover to avoid suspicion. Throughout the day, the CCTV revealed he changed his clothes repeatedly. Early the next day, at around 6:15 a.m., Jesse was spotted leaving the hotel and driving off in his car, stopping only to buy a shovel at a store out of town. By that time, Grace's parents were concerned after she did not reply to birthday wishes they sent her. 3 days later, Grace was reported missing by her parents, and a huge hunt got underway on the 7th of December 2018. Grace's father, David Mullane, arrived in New Zealand to make an emotional appeal for any information about his daughter's disappearance. Jesse had been identified by a detective as a suspect after Grace's mother had noticed that he had left a message on her Facebook page at 9:29 p.m. on the 1st of December, just 11 minutes before they left the Blue Stone room and went to his room. Jesse was interrogated for the first time by Detective Diana Levinson. He claimed that he had met Grace, but they parted at 10 p.m. on Saturday, and that was the last time he saw her. In the meantime, the detectives had acquired the CCTV footage from the hotel, which proved he was lying. By the time of his second interview, he had no choice but to admit to killing Grace, relying instead on the excuse that she had died during sex by accident after she asked him to choke her in an attempt to make sex more pleasurable. Following the interview, he was arrested and took officers to Grace's body. Grace's body was found on the 9th of December at around 4 p.m. She had been buried off Scenic Drive in the Waiheke Care Rangers Regional Park, and a post-mortem examination was done on the 10th of December. The autopsy determined that Grace had been strangled, and the bruises on her body were consistent with being restrained. The murder trial began in Auckland on November 4th, 2019. Kempson attempted to explain Grace's death as being accidental after a rough encounter had gone wrong, but the jury rejected his claim and found him guilty. Jesse Kempson was convicted of murder on the 22nd of November 2019, when he was 28 years old. During his trial, he was described as a sociopath who made some of the women he met or communicated with on Tinder highly uncomfortable. It later emerged that he took another British tourist out on a Tinder date before bringing her back to his Auckland motel room 8 months before he met Grace. Jesse sexually assaulted the tourist, then 21, while she lay on the bed crying and frozen with fear after she refused to have sex with him. She kept the attack secret until she recognized Jesse from media coverage the day he was charged with Grace's murder. Another of the women he communicated with on the internet, who was wary of meeting him, shared a series of messages in which he detailed his sexual preferences and admitted to her why he enjoyed doing what he did. It was speculated that Jesse's desire for domination was the underlying factor that led to Grace's tragic demise. In another trial, he was convicted of terrorizing his former girlfriend over months, subjecting her to violent assaults, threatening her with a butcher's knife, and forcing her into humiliating acts after telling her he had been sent by the CIA to kill her. Jesse was unwilling to accept what he had done and showed no remorse. On the 21st of February 2020, Jesse was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. Grace's story has raised awareness about the importance of safety for travelers, especially young women exploring the world. It has sparked initiatives and support networks to empower individuals and enhance safety measures. As we remember Grace, we honor her memory by advocating for safer travel experiences and raising awareness about the risks that travelers may face. Her legacy serves as a reminder that no one should experience harm while exploring the world. In the end, Grace Emmy Rose Mullane's legacy will be one of remembrance and hope. May her memory inspire us to continue working towards a world where travel is safe and where every individual, no matter where they are, is free from harm and can pursue their dreams. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jorge Cortez. Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was born on January 5, 1978, in Mexico City. He kept his childhood and teenage years private, only sharing that he often clashed with his mother, who cared deeply for him, and his father, who rarely intervened in their arguments. Jorge's strained family relationships likely contributed to his emotional isolation and the development of his aggressive and unstable personality. To escape his difficult home life, Jorge left at a young age and embarked on a journey across Mexico, taking on temporary jobs to support himself. He worked as a waiter in various bars in Mexico City, including those in the Rosa and Cona districts, and also relied on tips from tourists in the popular Villa du and Cuac districts, known for their extensive infrastructure and diverse entertainment options. Jorge's life of crime began in this place. In 2010, he was arrested for theft and given a 4-year prison sentence. However, because it was his first offense, the judge decided to release him on bail. At the time, no one suspected that this decision would set free a man who would later become one of Mexico's most notorious criminals. After his release, Jorge met a girl named Adriana and fell in love. Initially, he treated her with kindness and attention, but as their relationship deepened, his behavior became increasingly violent. Adriana soon found herself a victim of his physical abuse. Exhausted by his cruelty, she decided to end the relationship, but Jorge refused to accept her decision. One night, Jorge violently attacked Adriana, dragging her down the stairs by her hair and breaking her nose. He beat her so severely that she lost consciousness. When she came to, she saw Jorge holding a lighter and threatening to kill them both if she didn't stay with him. Despite his threats, Adriana continued to resist, which further enraged Jorge. He attempted to strangle her by grabbing her neck with both hands. However, Adriana managed to break free, grabbed a hammer, and began fighting back. She was able to force Jorge out of the apartment and ultimately out of her life for good. This violent confrontation occurred in 2011, and although Adriana reported the incident to the police, Jorge was released on bail and avoided punishment. In hindsight, Adriana's escape from Jorge that night saved her from a potentially deadly situation. Jorge would go on to take the lives of multiple women in the future. After meeting Jorge, 18-year-old Yang Kiang Marie became his new victim. Yang was a Korean girl who was very close to her mother, Monica, and her sisters, particularly Anna. Anna was a lively and athletic young woman who balanced her studies in psychology with a part-time job at a restaurant. Yang met Jorge at one of the bars where he worked, and they were immediately drawn to each other. After a brief courtship, they started dating, but their relationship was marked by violence. Despite their frequent arguments, they stayed together. When Young turned 19, she decided to declare her independence from her family and move to the city with Jorge. However, this change only made their problems worse. Jorge's behavior became increasingly controlling and abusive. He constantly monitored Yang's activities, calling her every hour at work and restricting her interactions with friends. As a result, Yang felt trapped and realized she was a victim of domestic violence. However, she hid the truth from others, including her family, to avoid causing them concern. Only a few close people, including her sister Anna and some friends, knew about the situation. Despite her family's warnings and advice to leave Jorge, Yang struggled to break free. She attempted to leave him multiple times but always returned, held back by her own fears and vulnerabilities. During this time, Yang underwent a significant transformation, changing from a happy and lively person to someone who was depressed and willing to do anything to please Jorge. The relationship continued to deteriorate, becoming increasingly toxic and damaging to Yang's well-being. Yang's relationship with Jorge was marked by violent outbursts. On one occasion, Jorge refused to let Yang into their apartment when she came home late. On another, he locked her inside, set her clothes on fire, and chased her around the room in a fit of rage. In August 2014, their arguments escalated, and Yang decided to leave Jorge and move in with her parents. A friend encouraged her to report Jorge to the police and end the abuse. Although Yang initially agreed, she eventually returned to Jorge and they continued living together. Tragically, Yang's life was cut short. On September 21st, her body was discovered in their apartment, bearing signs of severe bruising. Jorge claimed to have found Yang hanging in the bedroom, stating that he had left her sleeping at noon the previous day, September 20th, after she had worked a shift at the bar. Jorge claimed that he returned home on the morning of September 21st to find Yang deceased. He immediately contacted the police and notified Yang's family of the tragic event. The news of Yang's death was devastating to her family, prompting Monica and Anna to rush to the scene. Upon arrival, they found police officers and forensic experts already at the apartment, carefully removing Yang's body from the bed. Jorge stated that when he saw his deceased wife, he became frantic and attempted to assist her. A police officer explained to the family that an investigation was ongoing and they needed to stay outside the house to protect potential evidence. As they watched, Yang's body, covered with a sheet, was carried out of the house. The police also informed them that the initial evidence suggested Yang's death was a suicide, a conclusion supported by the position of the body in Jorge's account, which the police believed to be truthful. However, Yang's family was skeptical and struggled to accept this explanation, finding it hard to believe that she would take her own life. When the family arrived to identify the body and prepare the necessary documents, they were surprised to find that the examination protocol was almost complete. The death certificate stated that Yang had died from strangulation by hanging. However, when the relatives were allowed to view the body, they noticed bruises on Yang's legs that seemed suspicious. Jorge attempted to explain the bruises by saying that the body had slipped from his hands and fallen to the floor when he tried to move it from the bed. Monica was not convinced by Jorge's explanation and suspected that something was not quite right. Investigations revealed more about Yang's tumultuous relationship with Jorge, fueling suspicion that her death might not be the suicide police claimed. During police testimony, friends described constant fighting between they, revealing Jorge's history of jealousy and aggression. His behavior extended to frequent phone calls to Yang's workplace, indicating a pattern of controlling behavior. Yang's sister Anna noted that a few months before the tragedy, her behavior dramatically shifted. Anna added that she started distancing herself from the family once the relationship with Jorge started. This prompted concern within the family. Despite growing concerns about Jorge's unstable behavior and doubts about the official explanation, the police were quick to dismiss theories and rushed to close the case. Experts at the Katok morgue recommended cremating Yang's body, which meant that further forensic investigation would not be possible. Yang's mother was deeply suspicious of Jorge's involvement in her daughter's death, but she eventually agreed to the cremation due to pressure from her family, thereby giving up the chance to gather evidence to support her suspicions. Jorge did not attend the funeral, but he got a tattoo of a broken heart, supposedly to show his grief. However, he also cut off all contact with Yang's family. Yang's death had a devastating impact on her family, especially her mother, Monica. The overwhelming pain of losing her daughter, combined with feelings of loneliness and despair, led Monica to develop an addiction to alcohol and smoking. Monica was devastated when her daughter Yang passed away suddenly. Despite her overwhelming grief, Monica refused to accept the initial explanation of Yang's death, finding it contradictory to her daughter's outgoing and life-loving nature. Unsettled by details like the bruises on Yang's body and the lack of evidence supporting the claimed manner of death, Monica's instincts told her there was more to the story. To get answers, Monica launched her own investigation into the case. Monica acquired security footage from her daughter's home, revealing her son-in-law Jorge was the last person to see Yang alive. With the help of a private attorney and forensic pathologist, Monica reviewed Yang's final days. An unexpected development led to a shocking explanation, revealing a deeply seated scandal and a misclassified homicide. Monica's determination uncovered hidden details, ultimately revealing the truth behind Yang's death. The detective completely rejected the initial account of Yang's death, presenting conclusive evidence that proved she was murdered. Further investigation revealed several discrepancies with the original autopsy. There were no signs of hanging on Yang's body, but her neck showed signs of strangulation, and a scarf had been used to make it appear as though she had hanged herself. Bruises on her hands and fingernails suggested she had tried to fight back. The medical examiner confirmed that any competent expert would have reached the same conclusion. This raises serious questions. Why did the police ignore these facts, and why did the family receive a false report about their daughter's death? Monica's relentless pursuit of truth led her to conduct a 7-month investigation, uncovering a series of disturbing failures and incompetence by law enforcement agencies. Her research revealed that Yang had previously reported violence by Jorge to the police, but her cries for help were ignored. Monica also discovered that Jorge had ties to his father and the staff handling the case, which, combined with the severity of Yang's injuries and the apparent negligence of the authorities, compelled her to take decisive action. Monica appealed to the prosecutor's office, seeking a review of the case and justice for Jorge, the main suspect. However, she was met with neglect and cynicism instead of support. A prosecutor even questioned her competence, suggesting she should focus on being a housewife and seek psychological help rather than pursuing justice. Undeterred, Monica continued her investigation, driven by her love for her child and her desire for truth. Her perseverance ultimately paid off. Jorge committed another murder in 2016, a devastating end to Yang's story. This event began a new chapter in Campira's life. She met Jorge online, where he hid his dark nature behind a charming facade. Unaware of his past, she was drawn to his friendly, sociable personality, and they soon developed a romantic relationship. Campira's close friends discovered her new relationship when she posted a photo of herself and her boyfriend on social media, beaming with happiness. For several weeks, their romance seemed perfect. As 2016 drew to a close, Campira's mother, Margarita, met Jorge for the first time on December 28. Campira, Jorge, and her children then traveled to Acapulco to spend the New Year's holidays with her parents. However, Jorge later convinced Campira to extend their stay, and she asked her mother to watch the children for a few more days. Margarita agreed, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. 3 days later, Campira was found dead. The last time Margarita had spoken to her daughter was on December 30th. When Margarita tried to call Campira on New Year's Eve, she was met with silence. Campira always answered her phone or returned calls promptly, so Margarita's anxiety grew with each passing minute. As the hours ticked by, Campira's unusual silence and lack of online activity only heightened Margarita's concerns. Eventually, Margarita decided to contact Jorge to find out what had happened to her daughter. Jorge attempted to alleviate Margarita's concerns by downplaying the argument and Campira departure to celebrate the new year with friends. However, Margarita remained unconvinced and asked a family friend to check on Campira. When the friend arrived at Campira's house, Jorge told him that Campira was asleep and unable to meet with him. Margarita's suspicions grew, and she sensed that Jorge was hiding something. On December 31st, between 5 o'clock and 8 p.m., Jorge committed a heinous crime. He brutally murdered Campira by strangling her after beating her severely with an unknown object, leaving multiple injuries on her face and body. In an attempt to make it appear as though Campira had taken her own life, Jorge cut a lock of her hair, placed her body on the bed, covered it with a blanket, and left the gas stove on. He even placed a portrait of Campira's late ex-husband in her hand to create the illusion that memories of him had driven her to suicide. Around 8:30 p.m., Jorge packed his belongings and left the house. On the night of January 1, 2017, Margarita tried to contact her daughter Campira to wish her a happy new year, but was unable to reach her. She then called her son Gabriel, who was in the same city as Campira, and asked him to check on her. When Gabriel arrived at his sister's house, he was immediately hit with a strong smell of gas. After turning off the gas burners, he began searching for Campira and was shocked to find her body on the couch, bearing signs of a brutal beating on her face. As Gabriel threw off the blanket covering his sister's body, he was horrified by what he saw. Campira was wearing only her underwear, and her body was covered in numerous bruises. Several details caught his attention. There were drops of blood around her, although her body in underwear appeared clean, as if she had recently bathed. Additionally, Campira's head was almost completely shaved, which struck Gabriel as strange, as his sister was known to take great care of her hair. Gabriel reported the incident to the police and then called his mother to break the news to Margarita. Paramedics and police arrived, confirmed Campira's death, and restricted access to the scene. The family was stunned by grief, struggling to come to terms with what happened. Their eyes reflected sadness and a glimmer of hope for justice. The investigation was complicated by inconsistencies between the crime scene and the initial assumption of suicide. The police meticulously examined every detail to unravel the truth. The police initially suspected suicide, but Campira's family disputed this, finding it impossible to believe that a young, cheerful woman would take such a drastic step. Campira's family was convinced that her death was not a suicide, but a violent crime. A strand of hair found on her body that did not match anyone in the house reinforced their suspicions. They demanded a more thorough investigation, which was granted. A second forensic examination confirmed their fears, revealing that Campira was strangled and that the suicide scene was staged. The evidence included marks on her trachea and neck, bruises indicating a beating, and the absence of a strand of hair. The police launched an investigation, and Campira's aunt, Sandra, worked with the deputy prosecutor to have the case transferred to the prosecutor's office. However, progress was slow. Later, Sandra was called back to the prosecutor's office and informed that she and her brother, Gabriel, could be plaintiffs in the case. Campira's children were left with their grandmother after the tragedy. To shield them from painful memories, they were transferred to a new school. However, time alone didn't heal their wounds. 2 months later, the family was allowed to visit the apartment where Campira's body was found, collecting her belongings and possibly uncovering clues. Her laptop was found, but its data had been deleted. Fortunately, her iPad was password protected, and the last photos she took before her death were recovered. One disturbing photo showed Campira lying next to Jorge on the same sofa where her body was later found. Further investigation of the photos revealed more evidence. In one image, Jorge was seen holding a skull-shaped container that was later discovered in the apartment's freezer. He was also shown strangling Campira with one hand. Drawers in the desk yielded sketches of tattoos Jorge planned to get, further hinting at his possible involvement in the crime. The public was outraged when Jorge was released on bail in 2009, sparking widespread anger. Many realized that if he had been detained earlier, the young women might still be alive. The Campira and Young families continued to demand justice for their loved ones on social media, gathering over 13,000 supporters on a memorial page. 10 months after his escape, Jorge was finally caught on October 24, 2017. His arrest was unexpected, occurring during a routine patrol by the National Civilian Police in Livingston, Guatemala. The officers were patrolling the streets when they noticed a suspicious man who appeared to be homeless. A routine check of his documents and fingerprints revealed a shocking truth: the man was on the international wanted list with a high danger level. Jorge was immediately arrested and taken to the immigration center in Guatemala City, where he was detained pending further action. The Guatemalan authorities quickly contacted their Mexican counterparts to initiate the extradition process. According to the head of the Guatemalan police, Pablo Castillo, Jorge had been hiding under a bridge in western Guatemala, living on the streets and relying on the kindness of tourists for survival. The next day, October 25, Jorge was transported to the Mexican border city of Chicas, where he was handed over to the Mexican authorities. After crossing the border, Jorge was taken to Mexico City, marking the successful completion of the extradition process and the delivery of justice. Jorge appeared in court to face charges for his alleged crimes. A reporter managed to ask him a few questions, but Jorge responded with a complete denial of any wrongdoing, claiming he was unaware of the charges against him. This was despite being taken to court on October 26 for a preventive measure, specifically for the murder of Campira. During the trial, the prosecution presented strong evidence of Jorge's involvement in the crime. The investigation revealed that Jorge had brutally beaten the victim with an unknown object before strangling her to death. The prosecutor classified the crime as a feminicide, made worse by the fact that Jorge had a romantic relationship with the victim. The prosecutor also pointed out that Jorge had a prior conviction for theft and was possibly involved in the death of another ex-girlfriend, Jan. Despite the overwhelming evidence and arguments against Jorge, his lawyer proposed an alternative explanation that Jorge was mentally unstable and needed a psychological evaluation. This move came as the community awaited justice, expecting a suitable punishment for the perpetrator. After thoroughly examining the evidence, witness testimonies, and arguments, the judge turned his attention to Jorge and his lawyer. He asked how long it would take to complete the psychological evaluation. Following a consultation, Jorge's lawyer agreed that Jorge would attend all subsequent court hearings. Upon reviewing all materials and considering both sides, the judge rendered a verdict: there was sufficient evidence from the prosecutor to hold Jorge accountable for his crimes. The court ordered the investigation to continue and gave a 4-month deadline to gather new evidence. Meanwhile, Jorge was taken into custody and held at a pre-trial detention center. Despite Jorge's arrest and guilty verdict, the Campira and Jan families faced a lengthy and challenging process ahead. In August 2019, an oral hearing was held in Jorge's case. His lawyer asked the court to disregard the videos that showed Jorge entering and leaving Campira's house on the day she was murdered. They claimed that these videos were incomplete, taken from a 30-hour recording at the crime scene, and could not be used to prove Jorge's guilt. The videos had been given to the victim's family by a neighbor who recorded them. The family then passed them on to the police, who brought only partial recordings to court. The police had lost the original disc. Jorge's lawyer alleged that the Mexico City prosecutor's office had concealed this information, which only came to light on the day of the hearing. The defense lawyer argued that the materials used to obtain the arrest warrant were unlawful. Specifically, the lawyer claimed that a key video was given to the Campura family rather than the judicial authorities, and therefore could not be used as evidence. Despite this, the supervisory judge rejected the defense's petition after considering the prosecution's arguments and the testimony of Campura's friends and neighbors. Additionally, the court considered 2 witness statements, but did not accept them as evidence. The case proceeded, and Jorge was allowed to appeal the decision and present the same arguments again. Meanwhile, the young family was dealing with their own separate case. A ban on violence against women was established in Mexico City, thanks in part to advocacy from several groups, including the Mexican Institute of Human Rights and Democracy and the Center for Justice. This new decree was influenced by multiple high-profile crimes, including the murder of Jan. As a result, her case was forwarded to a Mexico City court for trial. Nearly 7 years after Jan's murder, charges were formally brought against her suspected killer, Jorge, in May 2021. Shortly thereafter, a judge ordered his arrest for his role in her murder. Despite these developments, Jorge's defense team was able to significantly slow down the investigation and prosecution. 9 years after Jan's death, Jorge Humberto Martinez Cortez was sentenced to 52 years and 6 months in prison in November 2023 for taking Jan's life. While the young family has finally received justice, Campura's family still faces a lengthy process. A trial had been scheduled for April 2022 at the detention center where Jorge was being held. Activists were resolute that this time the perpetrator would not evade accountability. Jorge's lawyers have successfully delayed the hearing once again, which was set to take place on January 29, 2024. Over 50 witnesses were expected to be called to testify, but for now, there is no update on the status of the hearing in the media. Jorge's family remains hopeful that he will eventually be held accountable for his actions. While nothing can bring Campura back, they seek justice and want to ensure that her death does not go unpunished.